You're advised to seek your own independent legal counsel to ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that all procedural requirements are met. You should also seek independent legal advice regarding the applicability of the writ of certiorari to the specific decision of the Historic Zoning Commission. So I think, yes. Okay. I will suspend the rules. Is that correct, legal?
Yes, you'll introduce a motion to suspend the rules for the purpose of introducing an item not on the agenda.
And she has said that. Is there a motion?
I so move.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, thank you. And that motion passes. So we'll suspend that. And we have a special presentation, actually. We have two retiring commissioners that we want to express our sincere appreciation for their generosity in serving this community and this city. So I'm going to call Commissioner Lee Fitz and Commissioner Caitlin Jones to come forward. Again, thank you for being here. And as they walk up, they have been very professional and also generous with their time. This is public service for the city. So if you think that we are staff, we're not. So we give of our generous time, and we really appreciate those of us here as well and those who are retiring.
Ready? Picture. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Thank you.
This looks like a tough one, guys. I'm not sad to be missing it.
We're going to miss them today.
Bye, we're going for drinks.
We'll come and see you later.
Maybe I'll come and just pull things off consider now. I don't know.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Just give them one more. One more. Next on our agenda is adoption of the June 9th and July 20th minutes, 2022 minutes. And do we have any questions, edits? A motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Second, all in favor? Okay, any opposed? None seeing? We pass that. Thank you. Ms. Ziegler, adoption to the agenda for the day.
Yes, we have several changes to recommend. One is 2007 Linden Avenue didn't meet the notification requirement, so it's an incomplete application. 406 South 11th Street made some changes, so we were able to issue an administrative permit. 230 Representative John Lewis Way and 233 4th Avenue North, two separate lots, but same project. Notification requirements not met. 166 2nd Avenue North, notifications not met. Same for 908 Meridian Street. And then several requested to defer. 309 Tillman Lane, 1309 Shelby, 1806 5th Avenue North, 1109 Porter, notification not met. And 1803 Russell Street, another alteration that would allow for administrative approval. So as a recap, that's number 9, 11, 12, 13, 18, 20, 29, 30, 31, and 32 that we're recommending or have to be removed from the agenda.
Any questions to Robin? Otherwise, a motion to accept the agenda.
Madam Chairman, I so move.
There's a motion.
Second.
There's a second. All in favor? Okay, none opposed. That passes, and thank you. Consent?
We do have a council member here. At least one. There may be others, but I did see one.
Right. Other than Councilman Withers, is there anyone else? Councilman, would you like to come through?
I'll wait till my item.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate your time here.
Oops. As noticed to the public, the items on the consent agenda will be voted on at a single time. No individual hearing will be held, nor will the commission debate these items unless a member of the audience or a member of the commission requests that the item be removed from the consent agenda. I'll read out the name of each case one by one. If you're in opposition to that project, please raise your hand when we call out that case. Items removed from the consent agenda will be heard at the end of the meeting. The cases on the consent agenda are 2208 18th Avenue South. That's an application for new construction of an outbuilding with setback determination.
Sean, we have,
Consider that for me.
Okay. Any others?
I'm sorry, Sean, what did she say?
There's a request to pull that first item, 2208 18th Avenue, from the
Okay,
consent agenda.
thank you.
1326 7th Avenue North, new construction of addition and an outbuilding. 1708 Ashwood Avenue, new construction of an addition. 212 Leonard Avenue, new construction and addition with setback determination. 2007 has already been pulled from consent. 1004 Montrose Avenue, new construction of an addition. Those three have all been pulled from consent. 627 2nd Avenue South, new construction of an addition and alterations to a historic building. And those are the items on the consent agenda. Staff recommends approval of these items with the applicable conditions, finding that they meet their design guidelines for the respective overlays.
Thank you, Sean. So the one that we are pulling will be at the end of the agenda. So
Yes, that's correct.
I just wanted to confirm that with the lady in the front. Thank you. All right, any questions to staff on the consent agenda or a motion?
Move approval for the revised consent agenda.
There's a motion. There's a second. Robin, do we need to, you caught that, I don't need to say their names. Or would you rather that I say commissioners' names?
It's always helpful if you repeat
Okay.
names, just because if I have to go
Right.
back and look at the recording, I can't always see who
Understood.
said it.
Will do. So the motion was made by Ben Mosley, and the second was made by Mina Johnson.
Thank you.
All in favor of the motion? Aye. Unopposed? None seeing. That motion passes for the consent agenda. Thank you.
Next on the agenda is 20111, I can't even talk, 101 Broadway. And Chair Bell and I were talking recently about the value of putting together a little history of the different legislation that has passed at different times and where that came about. And of course, that's going to take a little time. So I thought it might be interesting if I could just take a few seconds to tell you about where the signage regulations came from before we jump into this project. Just take a second. In 2011, or it may have been earlier, Mayor Dean asked Terry Cobb, who was then the director of the Codes Department, to facilitate discussions of the downtown sign code and overlays between Metro and various stakeholders. Representatives of planning, codes, mayor's office, MDHA, real estate professionals, sign manufacturers, Chamber of Commerce, Downtown Partnership, Convention and Visitors Bureau, and the district, and including our department, of course, were involved in that for, was it over a year, Commissioner Mosley? We were asked to adopt those DTC sign requirements into our Broadway and 2nd Avenue and later the downtown overlay guidelines and for downtown landmarks, which we did in 2013 with some minor alterations. There's a couple of ways it's different where we actually allow for more than the DTC. For Broadway, your guidelines allow for flashing and chasing lights on signage, and those aren't allowed elsewhere in the DTC. Broadway allows for signage to include a portion of the sign that rotates, which is not allowed elsewhere in the DTC. You allow for raceways, and in the DTC that has to be a modification. And so now for a little background on this specific building, the signage. A projecting sign with a modification for spinning element was approved in 2014. A mural that met the allotment was approved for the rear side, but before it was put up there, they actually moved it to the rear front. You can see it in this image. Right there. And then there were some signs that were historic that were repainted, and that's the back, those two arrows. And right there, and then also the front, there were two, and that's what you see on the left. And then they requested a mural here at the top. And we didn't count the whole thing as part of the allotment, but just the text, because in this case, that white background and that red shack was part of the historic character of the building. So we didn't count all of that as allotment like we normally would. And now the request is to add another mural to the left ground floor, which doesn't meet the design guidelines for location and for allotment. So the applicant is here to tell you about what they're proposing.
Thank you, Robin, for that background. And applicant, please come forward and give us your name and address as well.
Good afternoon. My name is Tom Morales. It's a pleasure to be in front of you. I'm a lifelong Nashvilleian, someone who is born and raised here, who as a child went to the Acme Feed and Seed with my mother and 9 brothers and sisters and my dad. It was the big box store there in Quarles Hardware, were the 2 stores that you could go and do the Home Depot shopping. So I'm in front of you because this building in my lifetime, and I'm 67 years old, has been a living, breathing billboard. What we suggest we want is Dolly Parton's image approved by Dolly Parton. We can go up and down Lower Broadway, and there's much more offensive things than a Dolly Parton mural. And to remove signage on what I consider an iconic building, it's the postcard of Nashville. One size in my humble opinion, and I'm a little bit emotional about this, does not fit all sizes. There's no building in Nashville, Tennessee, maybe no building in the United States with the historic value of that. I do not think this commission is here to stop history. It is to preserve history. And part of the preservation of history is to let it continue. For Dolly Parton, who is another iconic figure in the state of Tennessee, to give us her personal approval to put that sign on the side of a building, and we are not allowing it, is, well, I don't want to say what it is, but let me tell you what I've done. I have saved the Loveless Cafe as a managing partner. I have saved the Woolworth building, iconic, where John Lewis was arrested for the first time. I have saved the Acme Feed and Seed. I brought dancing in the district, which could arguably be said to have saved Lower Broadway when they were arguing to destroy the Ryman Auditorium. So as I sit here, to tell me and to tell Nashville that we have to take down a sign to put up a sign, to me, is insulting to the history of Nashville and the history of Tennessee. I say this humbly. I don't say it like someone who has done nothing to save Nashville. I'm trying to save Nashville from itself right now. I can go up and down Broadway and list all the failures, but you will never find a bigger supporter of the Historic Commission than Tom Morales. So here I am, about just emotional about it, and I ask for you to concede on this one and let the building be what the building's been for 70-something years as Acme Feed and Seed, since 1883, as Self-Rising Flour was invented in this building. Beard and buggies were built in this building. Every piece of wood that we took out became a bar or a table. So it's an affront to me to be here arguing that I need to put a sign, take a sign down to put up a Dolly Parton image. Anyway, sorry for the emotion, but I represent these people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morales. We'll open public hearing. Anyone to speak on this project? Seeing none, so we'll close public hearing, and we will have discussion with the commissioners.
Madam Chair, I have a question to the staff. So as I was reading, I do appreciate the history of the signage and, those murals and those. But as I was reading Broadway design guideline, I could not find actual wording in regards to mural. Is there any specific to mural in the, or I may be overlooked, so if you would guide me to the right direction page.
Painting of brick is mainly what we're looking at because we don't review content. So whether it's a sign or a mural, a solid color, a design, that's really not the issue. So murals are not allowed on the ground level, and then there's a certain allotment because that DTC requirements didn't even address painted signs. And that's where we were coming from with that. And we thought it might be appropriate because it's on a section that's already painted historically. But then there was the concern about the location and the allotment. And I'm not sure I said this, but we didn't count the 4 repainted historic signs against the allotment.
At a recent meeting, we approved a mural, I believe it was a mural, of Chris Scruggs, but I think it was on a non-contributing building. Is that why it was recommended for approval?
Do you know what building that was? I don't know it by the content.
It was 2 months ago. And
It was Bootleggers, I believe.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that.
I think it was the building.
Yeah, Bootleggers, yes, is a non-contributing building made of cinder block. That was one reason, but also it's not a corner building. It has a parking lot next to it, so presumably there will be a building there probably in the near future just because of every other lot's getting a new building now, and so then it won't even be seen. Plus, the third reason was that they already had a bunch of very large banner signs there before they were added to the overlay, so they didn't have to take those down, and we thought that the painted sign was an improvement over banner signs. So those were the 3 main reasons that that one's a little different.
Robin and staff, as proposed, this is a mural, not an advertisement, I guess, if you will. And I may be making a distinction that the guidelines don't anticipate, and given that you and I both sat on the signage committee, I'm not sure this is one we discussed at any length or even considered. So I think as an advertisement, or I'm trying to figure out if, because it's not necessarily an advertisement to the business or an advertisement for something other than Dolly Parton, who's a state treasure, national treasure, and certainly some people want to get their picture taken in front of, I would guess. The painting of the masonry, I guess, is one issue. I'm trying to sort of dissect this and figure out a way and figure out, the right way that is both considers the particular nature of this mural, of this building, but also within the district, because, while we don't always necessarily do for one that we do for others, we certainly get accused of not doing for all what we do for one, and that has to take some bearing in how we rule and try to interpret the guidelines and enforce them in this district specifically. So do you see the 2 items seem to be coupled in the argument, at least to this point, and in the staff's analysis of painted masonry and signage. Do you see a difference there? And I almost want to invite the person sitting next to you to perhaps comment on if there is a difference in anything that Metro has analyzed before, maybe not in this particular circumstance, but
And
similar.
I can't speak to the codes. We were just looking at the guidelines, and that's paint on masonry. That's the number one issue. But this is going to be in a location that's already been painted, so that made sense to us. Then there's the allotment for painted murals, signage, whatever you want to call it, because again, we don't review the content, so what, if it's advertising someone or not advertising, wasn't really an issue. It was the allotment. And so that's why we had recommended taking the one up above down. And then there's the issue that painted signage or murals shouldn't be on the lower level because historically they were on upper levels. So those were the three main concerns and why we made the recommendation we made 2 months ago.
You know, it's a difficult thing, and nobody is more respected in this town for his historic preservation efforts than Mr. Morales, and we appreciate all that you've done in your lifetime to preserve Nashville. We have a hard time with Lower Broad because nobody has enough signage down there. Everybody needs more and bigger and flashier and all that. I would propose that in this instance, because the background is already painted and because this piece of artwork does not represent the building, it does not represent the building owner, it does not represent anything that's within the building, that it's not really signage or advertising, it's really a piece of public art. And I would urge that we consider that option from the standpoint of this particular project.
Madam Chair, in that Vice Chair's point, I was looking at, originally it was consent, so I thought, staff recommendation was appropriate. And then I did a deeper read on the Broadway design sign regulation. So in that sense, this is a mural, not the sign, not advertisement of the building, not advertisement of the business. Rather, I see as a public art. And so the location of this public art, such as mural, is already painted. So it's not, destroying historical significance brick because it's already painted. So I don't think significant damage will be done to the building. So in that sense, I think we were not approving the advertisements assigned, so I'm kind of really heavily leaning towards applicants' point of view, and especially Broadway and, is a very special place, and public art, each side of the river, we are more and more encouraging, public to establish public art and engage public art. For that sense, especially the content of the art piece, I am kind of swayed by applicants' position to display that national treasure on that iconic location. And on top of the old signature, like Acme building, yes, it was made on 2014, but significance of the building itself is that sign kind of represent the history. So therefore, I am, again, swayed by not asking applicant to remove that top sign because of the unique history of the building and unique location and overall significance and public interest. So I'm now swayed by kind of supporting applicant request to approve the signature as well as not requesting to remove the top original Acme sign as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. I do have General. So when having this earlier conversation about having signage by the DTC, and was you two that were in that, was murals, murals are kind of new, not new, but really up and coming in Nashville. So Was there any kind of discussion on that, or, and that's one section. Is there anything in our guidelines that would have some clarity or ambiguity about this particular's?
And again, that's the painting of bricks. So we aren't looking at it from the standpoint of whether it's art or whether it's signage.
Yep.
It is something that is painted on the brick, whether it's a solid color or art or advertising the business, it's paint on the building.
Right.
That's how the guidelines look at it. I don't recall the DTC discussion talking about painted signs, but again, this isn't really a sign anyway.
I don't recall a specific conversation about murals, and certainly having government involved in the regulation of artwork is a checkered past. It's a little pun. The building checkered. So I don't know that there's any cover or any guidance that I could point to that would help us. Right. I do have some additional comments. I'm not in disagreement with. I think the staff in their original recommendation did what should be done. But I would maybe offer, given the discussion and the direction this seems to be headed, I'd offer this in terms of some perspective on this and possibly future cases and the desire to, it just seems that Broadway, maybe to characterize it as a copycat is not altogether accurate, but once something is successful in one place, it seems to spread to want to happen in other places. So I would direct the commission's attention to figure 3 in the staff report that we've got Barnum and Bailey. Looks like they're in town. There's circus animals that are being paraded down First Avenue in anticipation probably of the circus appearing maybe at Miserable Auditorium Municipal Auditorium. And there's a obvious painted signage that is on the lower level, the ground floor. And then there's some additional painted signage above that, we don't necessarily take, taking a measurement off of a sign with this perspective wouldn't be something that the staff would do or that we would entertain. But I would say in terms of this particular application, the fact that the brick is already painted and that this building, based on this photograph's not dated, but based on that evidence and that it may have gained some historical significance in its own right, that be some additional justification and at least some consideration for this particular instance in this particular location.
Other commissioners?
I agree with the analysis so far from Commission and from Mr. Morales. I'm persuaded that in this case, a mural in this location where it's already painted can be appropriate in this particular instance. And just to reiterate what Commissioner Stewart said, the reason that we pay a lot of attention to these requests because property owners on Broadway are constantly pushing the envelope with us, and you've seen the results. So even though it might seem silly to why we're even discussing it, it's because we do take it seriously, and we're constantly holding back just a rush of inappropriate signs, inappropriate development. I think in this case, especially given the historic condition of the building as a giant billboard and its historic condition in the past, as shown in Figure 3. Thank you for pointing that out, Ben. That's helpful. I'm inclined to support the applicant.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Request. With respect.
Okay.
Oh,
it's okay.
You want to say anything? You have the light on a minute.
Well, I'm just delighted. I'm just delighted with the comments here. So I just, that's about all I have to say.
Madam Chair, with respect to 101 Broadway, I move to approve the applicant's request to paint Dolly Parton on the side of Acme.
Second.
But there were a couple other conditions within the staff report that I think are still applicable.
Right.
So if the first was third, any associated building illumination must be reviewed and permitted prior to installation. And fourth, metallic, fluorescent, or day glow paint shall not be used. I think those are reasonable.
Yes, I'll revise my motion to include those conditions and to remove condition 2.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, the motion has been revised.
Point of clarification. So the proposed sign is, I believe, 18 by exceeding 125 square feet. So are we asking applicant to reduce the mural? I am swayed by as is, so I would propose striking condition number 1 as well.
Sure. Agreed.
Robin, is that good for the revision of the motion? Okay. All right, and we
Do
had
you want to just articulate the whole motion as you see it
yes,
now?
please.
I have to. All right. Again, we'll try this again. Thank you. With respect to 101 Broadway, I move to approve the applicant's request for the proposed mural with staff recommendations, with the exception of recommendation 1 and 2, but leaving in 3 and 4.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Second.
And there's a second. There's a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? None opposed? Are there any other comments?
Yeah, again, referring back to some of the historical photographs that have been submitted by the staff or gathered by the staff, I don't think that the omission necessarily of item 1 would be in excess of the area of brick that was historically painted or is currently painted on the building, just for the record.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. Okay. Thank you again for the discussion. In public, you've heard a really good one, so.
Thank y'all.
Thank you, Tom.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Morales.
Okay, so my first application for today is the Jenkins Condo Complex. This is a application to correct an existing violation. If you remember, 1701 Blair Unit 2 and 2021 Belmont Units 1 and 2 were heard by the commission back in June. They had violations for handrails and partition walls that were constructed without permits. The handrails and the rear partition walls were approved, while the front partition wall was required to be removed within 90 days of the commission's decision. 1701 Blair Boulevard Unit 1 had deferred at this time. That violation will be heard separately from this application. It's not changing. Sean, it's not. Sorry about that. So this application will address the front partition walls. Front walls will be highlighted in yellow, Unit 1 of 1701 Blair, highlighted in green at Unit 2 at 1701 Blair, highlighted in green at 2021 Belmont Unit 1, and then highlighted in green and blue for 2021 Belmont Unit 2. So based on the plans that were provided to staff, the applicant intends to reduce the height of the front portion of the partition wall by about 2 feet and then propose to bring it back 4 feet as well. This will make about 2 feet of the partition visible above the parapet wall. So also with the previous violation, several of the partition walls were above 6 feet. Staff is recommending that all partition walls are above 6 feet for the front be brought down. The applicant also provided several kind of photos to show what the partitions will look like before and after construction. These are visible on the screen. Let's see. So based on the photographs of the condos that were provided as well as corrective plan, staff finds that the new design is applicable and very visible from the street. So staff recommends approval of the proposed design for the rooftop partition walls at the Jenkins, located at the corner of Blair and Belmont Boulevard. Staff recommends that the violation of the partition walls installed at 1701 Blair Boulevard Units 1 and 2 and 2021 Belmont Boulevard Units 1 and 2 installed without permit be corrected by means of proposed design removed within 90 days, proposed design, or be removed within 90 days of the decision. Staff finds the proposed partition wall meets sections 2B, 1B, and 2B, 2F of the guidelines for height and scale, 2B, 2A for location, and sections 2B, 1D, and 2B, 2F for materials. Any questions?
Thank you, Kelly. Applicant?
Michael Ward, Allard Ward Architects. Kelly, thank you. We enjoyed working with Kelly and Melissa to sort of sort through this. We had put these original partitions up when the building was built for the original clients, the Dilworths who bought one of the units, and this work was done when the building was finished, and all that was done sort of, I think, working with the Metro. So we're excited to sort of get these back to where they're supposed to be, and appreciate y'all working with us. Brian? A little more back.
Yeah, well, I'm Brian Hahn with Allard Ward Architects. We thank Kelly and Melissa for coming out and kind of walking the site with us to get a better understanding of how to best to present the changes to the commission. And I think everybody's probably had a chance to look through those pictures, but we kind of walked the perimeter of the sidewalk and took some before pictures and kind of photoshopped out where we actually went up and taped all the walls as well, and then photoshopped out to kind of those lines to best represent what the after would look like. So I don't know that we need to go back through the pictures. We're happy with the outcome. I think that the pictures kind of tell the story, and we're just here if you have any questions.
Any questions to the applicant? None so far. Okay. We might have something, but not right now. It's pretty clear. Thank you.
Thanks.
Open public hearing. Close public hearing. Commissioners?
I think this looks like a good solution, and we talked about it at length, at least I think it was 2 months ago. So I appreciate the applicants figuring out a solution and working with the staff. And unless there are any comments, I'll make a motion. On 1701 Blair Boulevard and 2121 Belmont Boulevard, I move for approval of the staff recommendation.
Motion?
Second.
Second by Vice Chair. All in favor? Okay. Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes. Thank you. Might hang around. There's one more.
So 1701 Blair Boulevard Unit 1 was previously deferred from the June 2022 to June 2022 meeting, The violation includes partition walls, railings, a canopy structure, and screening installed without permits. As you already know, the front partition wall was just addressed, so that will not be discussed as part of the violation. So for this application, staff finds the location of the rear partition wall highlighted in green, the screening highlighted in purple, and the railing to meet the guidelines given the limited visibility and given the location of the screening in the rear partition wall. The main element of concern is the canopy structure that's highlighted in blue. The structure was built behind the roof access and extends the size of the roof access. When the SP was initially approved, it was approved to be 36 feet tall at the top of parapet with a roof access that was relatively small at the time. By installing the canopy structure, the structure as a whole is now taller than what was previously approved with the SP. Staff finds that the canopy does not meet the original permit or sections 2B, 1B, and 2B, 2F of the guidelines. So staff recommends approval of the railings, rear screening, and rear partition wall, finding that they meet sections 2B, 1B, and 2B, 2F for height and scale, section 2B, 2A for location, and sections 2B, 1D, and 2B, 2F for materials. Staff recommends removal of the canopy structure within 90 days of the Commission's decision, finding that does not meet sections 2B, 1B, and 2B, 2F for height and scale, and section 2B, 2A for location. Any questions?
Thank you, Kelly. Applicant?
Good afternoon. Quan Poole, 511 Union Street, Suite 2700. Thank you, staff, for working with us on this project. I think that we are certainly grateful for the compromise that was able to be reached on the partition structures. You know, it just leaves right now the canopy structure. And so the main thing, there are basically 3 points that I want to make as it relates to that structure. The first one being that the design guidelines as drafted are made to cover portions of the building, the exterior of the building that can be visible from the right-of-way or from the street. And which this canopy structure doesn't meet that definition. The second point will be that even if visible from the right-of-way or from the street, the design does not vary greatly from the historic structures that are in the vicinity of the proposed development, and that there's actually no extension of the overall height of the building as relates to where the canopy structure will be put in place. And so I have photographs that I've made copies for each board member. And I love for those to be made a part of the record. But as you receive the one that's very on top, will be a picture of the original roof access structure that was built. And then the second photograph in that packet will be the newly proposed canopy structure. And what you'll see is that what has happened is that the canopy structure is more or less an extension of what was already there, that roof access structure. They're actually, and I know the staff report indicates that it will be, and I'll give you all a little time to receive the photographs. And so what you'll see is that the structure itself really does not increase vertically. It's only horizontal. And so, but it really brings me to my very first point, which the design guidelines only cover structures the exterior buildings that can be viewed from the right of way. And if we were to go to the very first picture, I believe in the slideshow, it's a visual from Belmont Boulevard. I think this is Belmont. It's a visual from Belmont Boulevard, and you can see the roof access structure, which is visible from the right of way, but you cannot see the canopy structure that has been added on to the very rear of the structure. And so, in our opinion, because it's not visible from that right of way, according to the design guidelines, it is not something that the board would have jurisdiction over. And the second point is that even if it is visible from the right-of-way, what Section 2B states is that the addition shall be compatible by not contrasting greatly from that of the historic districts, and the historic structures. So if you look at the staff report, it indicates that the buildings across from Belmont Boulevard vary in height from 40 feet all the way up to 60 feet. And so this addition, even the roof access structure, only stands at 41 feet tall. The measurement to the parapet is 36 feet tall. The roof access structure is an additional 5 feet. And so that 5 feet, which was approved by the commission back in September of 2015, is the exact same height. And so if you go through your packet and look at the site plan, and this will be, excuse me, I think it's figure 6, where you'll see the surrounding structure, which shows that 40 through 60 foot height. But then if you look at the site plan itself, it's shown as Unit 5 on the design. And Unit 5 is where you see that roof access structure, and then so that was approved as the current height as we sit today is 41 feet. So there is no increase in structure despite what is indicated in the staff report. And then the only other thing that I'll mention is that there was a reference in the staff report that the structure was only approved back in 2015 because it was shown to be small in nature. If you look at that very first photograph, the roof access structure is smaller than what the canopy addition would be. And I went back and I reviewed the 2015 staff report, both in March and in September. I reviewed the minutes from each meeting, and I went back and watched the public hearing for both of those items in 2015. And there was no reference at all or no condition placed on that development that related to the size of the structure, none whatsoever. And so there were conditions placed on the development, but nothing related to the size of the structure itself. And so the final point, or excuse me, those are the points that I want to make. Unfortunately, my client had a meeting that he was unable to attend the hearing today, but he wrote a letter that he wanted me to read into the record for the commission's consideration. And so the letter says, "We are 30-year residents of Nashville. We love the community and have no intent other than to make it better. Thanks to the staff, we're continuing to try to find a reasonable compromise. We're happy to make the changes in the partition as staff has requested. It seems we are all in agreement on all items except for the canopy. The purpose of the canopy is simple: to provide a small area of shade that makes the deck usable during the six plus months of the year when the heat otherwise makes the deck unusable for most of the day. The canopy is not visible from any public roadway. It is visible only from the Jenkins property. The HOA has approved the canopy as it exists and has agreed to enforce provisions to ensure no other canopies are added that do not meet the same requirements. There have been no complaints from any residents about the canopy, so in other words, it can't be seen from the public roadway, and the only people who can see it are the neighboring property owners who support the project. And all those letters are in the packet as letters of support. The canopy was constructed in the exact same with the exact same materials and colors to be perfectly consistent with the stair access as approved above the third story, seen as a small stair access. These are not small at all. They're large and contain stairwells, an elevator, and a landing. That's why adding a modest canopy in the back that is completely invisible because it is totally hidden by the large stair access that was previously approved by this board. If we were forced to remove the canopy, it will be replaced by an alternative to provide some sort of shade or comfort. Whatever the alternative method may be, whether it be an umbrella, a sunshade, a tarp, or some other tent, the material will be significantly worse than what's in place now. None of the residents of the condo association want to see that. They'd much rather see the current structure with the materials that staff has indicated support for that match the architecture and design of the original building. Thank you for your time. We sincerely hope that you're able to grant this request. And so I am available now if anyone has any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kwan.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here. Open public hearing. close public hearing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm having a hard time with this one. The reason being is, as far as height, it is, I think the mechanical structure, such as roof structure itself, is exceeding the original height. So that is a giving. However, the additional canopy structure does not increase the height, and rather not quite visible from the front of the building. In that sense, so, and also this building is rather infill new building structure. So the design itself is unique in itself. So for that perspective, yes, indeed, it is a violation. They built that canopy structure without proper modification of the original plan. That is giving. But we came up with great solution as far as partition wall and side wall. So I am kind of having a hard time, but since it's not exceeding the mechanical structure's height and size is modest, I am rather leaning towards applicant forgiveness plea. So I'm interested to hear the commissioner's opinion as well.
I have to agree with Commissioner Johnson, and I think that, yes, we don't like to see things added without, going through the proper channels and all that. I do think that one of the real determinants for this that sways me is that it is not visible from the public right-of-way. If anything was visible from the public right-of-way, and that was the whole issue with the parapet walls. So I tend to agree with Commissioner Johnson. So.
I have a question, hypothetical, though. I don't know how many units. We always worry about precedent, right? And what's next door neighbor going to do once this one's approved, if we were to approve it? And I'm frankly tired of seeing this building in front of us, and I don't want to see it next month because next door neighbor builds one too that is visible. So I just want to pose that, and is that an issue that we need to consider right now? It is to me, kind of.
Duly noted.
Commissioner Price, for that reason exactly, I'm not inclined to be permissive in this case, because I think, as presented originally, this is a fourth living level. It's outdoor, and I know the canopy makes it more so, but I'm not compelled that it was sort of part of the original intent, and this notion of a bait and switch that we sometimes deal with, some more egregious than others. I'm just cognizant of that, and this one, while difficult and not visible from the street, I don't. It just smells bad to me. That's not tying it to the guidelines per se, but it just smells bad.
Madam Chair, one additional comment I would like to make is because of those difficulty, that's why we, at the last meeting, we asked applicant and homeowners association to meet and come up with design guideline, meet with the specific, building. So I think applicant letter indicate HOA in agreement, and then future addition, they will meet design guideline. So in that sense, I think we can defy this decision until HOA present us proper, appropriate design guideline for future rooftop violation, or rather not being by a violation. So that would be more, palatable solution for us.
Thank you, Commissioner.
The applicant did meet with the HOA, and they have not a new proposal, but a reasoning for, or guidelines for allowing this for everybody. Did you want to invite Mr. Poole back up to talk about that?
Okay, sure.
Thank you. So there was a set of sort of design standards that, for the most part, were pulled from conditions that are existing in the design guidelines. Those would be added to the HOA documents, and they relate to the size. There would be no visibility from the street. The standards the architecture and the materials have to be approved by the commission, and it can't increase the size of the roof access structure that is there now. So the height and width of that would have to be followed moving towards the rear of the structure. So nothing will be built in the front of that roof access structure. It has to be in the rear, and it has to stay within the same confines of what's already there. And so there's a list of 4 to 5 conditions that would have to be followed from the HOA, and those were shared with Ms. Ziegler as well as Ms. Mitchell prior to the hearing.
Just another little question here. So if we allow this one to happen without going forward, then would this be an exception? I think I'm maybe not misunderstanding that, but, going forward, there's going to be requirements under the HOA. So is this an exception to the rule? Let's think about that a second.
The staff hasn't had time to fully look at those, so I don't know if they're, I can really digest them, so I can't say that they're enough, then that you wouldn't want changes. Just for the record, I did want to point out that the guidelines say these guidelines shall apply only to the exterior of buildings and to portions of proposed structures that would be visible. So it's both exterior and what's visible. But the fact that it's not visible could be an argument for approving it. I just want to make sure that the guidelines are clear. And I want to say that again, for the record, the comment was made that you didn't approve the size of the building. You absolutely did through those drawings. Not every single aspect of every single project is discussed, obviously, but you absolutely did approve the size of the building.
Thank you for clarification on that.
I also think that this canopy is in violation because, from the staff report, it says under the original SP, the building was approved to be 36 feet tall at the top of the parapet with small-scaled roof access structures exceeding that height. And so this is clearly not a roof access structure, and anything coming up in the future would not meet the prior approvals, and so would be outside the guidelines. So I think it's pretty clear that if they tried to do this again, it should not get a permit because it does not meet the approval conditions when the building was built.
So, Commissioner Stewart, are you sort of stating then that because the SP is pretty, I don't know how the SP would view this, and if the SP would then need to be amended for this to be able to happen. Is that the suggestion in your comment that not only would this board need to approve something because it's on the exterior, but if it were permitted, that to grant the right for an addition, a rooftop addition that was permitted, then perhaps the SP would need to be amended as well?
From a process standpoint, that's the way that I would understand the correct process for doing this. So.
I don't disagree.
We do understand that, right, Commissioners? And also, as Robin expresses, that, they hadn't had time to review all those details to say this is going to work. I know Commissioner Johnson said defer, but legal we can't defer this. Yeah.
You know, we deal with these, like you said, Ben, I think bait and switch, where one thing is permitted and then we find out a year later that something else was built. And typically, we don't give a whole lot of quarter unless there's a really good reason. And for that reason, and in the interest of moving on, I would like to move that we accept the staff recommendation for removal.
That is a motion by Commissioner Price. Is there a second? There is a second by Commissioner Mosley. All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? So that's 3, 4, and 2 nay.
Madam Chair?
Yes, I lean to staff recommendation. So that makes 4 to 2. Okay. Thank you, applicant. Thank you for trying. More conversation with the HOA. Okay.
The next case is 804 Shelby Avenue. 804 Shelby Avenue is a contributing home in the Edgefield Historic Preservation District. The side-gabled bungalow-style house at 804 Shelby Avenue was built in 1920. In recent years, the house has fallen into some disrepair, and the applicant requests demolition of the contributing home, arguing for economic hardship. The applicant has provided one engineering report with their application. The report mentions cracks in the foundation of the home, cracks in the exterior brick facade, and a poor roof condition that has led to mold and mildew issues. Staff recently visited the home and observed the issues described, but found these issues to be issues commonly found in structures of this age. Repairs and reinforcement are often necessary, but rarely require full demolition of the structure. Staff finds that the home is not beyond reasonable repair. The applicant has also provided a demolition estimate, a cost of compliance estimate, estimated market value of the home in its current condition, and a market value appraisal after completion of work. In order to evaluate the estimated market value of the existing home after restoration, staff referenced the Assessor of Property website and real estate listings and was able to compile a list of recently restored comparables, showing that the applicant would likely see a significant return after restoration. Furthermore, staff finds that if the applicant's estimated market value of the home in its current condition is accurate, the applicant may have overpaid for the property. The applicant has also provided 2 letters received from the Department of Codes and Building Safety regarding the property. While staff appreciates that the applicant provided this background information on the property, staff also acknowledges that the MHZC must follow the MHZC guidelines for this overlay in reviewing this case rather than any separate standards that are applicable to the Department of Codes and Building Safety. The current owner has owned the property since December 14th, 2021, and so is not responsible for the disrepair and deterioration of the home. However, it is incumbent on the applicant to make an informed purchase, and at least some of these issues would have been discoverable at the time of purchase. The applicant did not provide an inspection report from the time of purchase. There is no doubt that the general lack of upkeep over the years added to the deterioration of the home. However, staff finds that the home is not beyond reasonable repair. Staff recommends denial of demolition of 804 Shelby Avenue, finding that the project does not meet Section 5B2 for appropriate demolition and 1740-420E for economic hardship. The project meets Section 5B1 for inappropriate demolition. I'm happy to take any questions, and I know the applicant is here as well.
Anyone from commissioners? Okay.
Thanks.
Just for public record, 3 of us from the commission did go through a walkthrough on this. Applicant?
Good afternoon. My name is Eric, and I've been asked by the owners to represent them here today and to convey this following statement. Thank you all for your time and consideration. When the owners looked at purchasing the property, it was with the understanding and expectation that the property was going to be demolished. As a contractor, myself, with some experience working with the Metro Historic Zoning Commission, the owners were thrilled to have me help them with this project, and were equally thrilled to be able to help improve the Nashville community by designing homes that would reflect and represent the district's architectural and historic character. However, the owners are confused and perplexed about the situation they find themselves in. Little did they know they would find themselves in the middle of a process between opinions of the Metro Historic Zoning Commission and the inspection results of the Department of Codes and Building Safety, let alone finding themselves to have to justify those inspection results as if they were the ones asking for the structure to be demolished, and now need to provide an economic hardship. When the owners reviewed the inspection report of Teresa Hayes on 8/26 of 2020, before considering the purchase of the property, they sent several contractors, myself included, to confirm the inspection report. I, in my professional opinion, concur with the reports that there are several structural issues, not just with the roof, walls, and floor, but also the foundation and piers in the crawl space. This was also confirmed by structural engineer Akbar Arab and Zachary Fitch of the AFS Foundation and Waterproofing Specialist. It was clear that before any work can begin, the foundation would need to be addressed, and this property first needs to be brought up to property codes and standards before any reasonable repairs could begin. As I move to my next points, the owners want to make it clear that they respect and appreciate both the staff of the Historic Zoning Commission and the Codes of Building Safety. The last thing they want to do is offend either of them, as we will be working with both of them throughout this project. The owners appreciate the value of historic preservation and are not just another investor out to make money. As much as they would like to preserve property, they too found this property was impractical to renovate. The owners are merely pointing out discrepancies of evaluating this structure as it pertains to economic hardship. In the inspection report of Teresa Hayes, and the staff of the Metro Zoning Commission, the inspection report here states that the extent of the damage and deterioration of structures rendered in this structure is unfit for human habitation. The severity of the condition in the property such that repairs necessary to bring this property into compliance with applicable codes would exceed 50% of the structure's value, qualifying this property for demolition. And in the case of the property's damage, this structure exceeds 75%, rendering restoration of the structure impractical. The level of damage and destruction is immediate hazard to the community. Do not make any repairs. And the staff report mentions here that the staff had viewed the home and it is not beyond reasonable repair. The staff did not observe anything unusual for a structure this age that typical repairs and restoration could not fix. Notice the section of the department code said do not make any repairs, while the staff report says the home is not beyond reasonable repair. There's definitely a discrepancy between the staff and of the Zoning Commission and the Department of Codes and Building Safety, a structural engineer, a foundation specialist, and myself. Additionally, the owners want to point out the next statement that says there are reasonable methods to repair deteriorated roofs, cracks in the building and foundation, and to remove mold and mitigation that do not require demolition of the house. The owners would like to agree that there are methods to do all those things, but these are far from economically reasonable. The whole point, according to Section 2, is a denial of demolition will result in economic hardship. Before we get into the points on economic hardship, the owners wanted to first point out demolition order dated on June 29th, 2022. It states that the cost of such repairs, alterations, and improvements necessary to render this structure fit for human habitation or use in compliance with the application codes and ordinances would exceed 50% of the physical value of the structure. You are hereby ordered to remove and demolish this structure. It is clear that the Department of Codes understands that when 50% of a structure needs repair, and in this case, the structure exceeds 75%, it would exceed the physical value of the property, and it was on this basis and determination that the structure was ordered to be removed or demolished. The owners now want to point out the staff report states it's responsibility of the applicant to prove hardship rather than for the staff to disprove hardship. And additionally, the staff report says on page 10, the Department of Codes and Building Safety cannot order a demolition, yet here we have a demolition order. The owners are confused. Do they violate or ignore the demolition order and the do not make any repairs or begin making reasonable repairs, which we would need to get permits from the codes department in order to make such repairs. Additionally, the owners discovered in the process the staff ran into a red flag in the system. Apparently, there's a red flag on this property that the codes department would not remove, and the owners have no idea what that's going to mean to them next. Finally, we're going to address the economic hardship issue. In the staff's attempt to disprove hardship, the owners found many discrepancies and errors in their numbers that they feel, if accurate, would have been an obvious economic hardship. Number one, there seemed to be a misunderstanding between reasonable repairs and the comparison houses that the staff provided that were the basis were way beyond reasonable repairs, rather they were full renovations. As the staff's opinion that several of the line items would be necessary or could be reduced even mentioned that some of the windows look to be in acceptable condition, the building codes will not be looking at what is acceptable. It will be looking for what is needed to bring this up to codes. Having personally worked with the historic department, there is a window brand list that are acceptable, and these are not cheap windows. For example, the owners have found rehab costs that range from $200 a square foot to $250 conservatively in the Nashville area, making renovations on this home or restoration $207,000 to $250,000, and that does not include dealing with the structural issues of the house or mold mitigation. The owners feel it is unfair to evaluate reasonable repairs and not evaluate the true cost of what it will take to bring the structure into compliance with the Department of Codes and Building Safety. Number two, after the opinion of the staff to keep things that are acceptable condition, they then provided comparison houses that were full-blown renovations. In evaluating economic hardship, it's unfair to compare reasonable repair recommendations to a house that has gone through a total renovation with all new plumbing, electrical, and HVAC units. Additionally, it did not appear that any of the comparison houses had to deal with structural issues, let alone a demolition order. Based on the recommended properties, they claim that the renovations, when the renovations are complete, not just reasonable repairs, but a full renovation, that 804 Shelby Avenue could easily sell for $700,000 to $800,000. In reality, this two-bedroom, one-bath, 1,037 square foot home on 804 Shelby Avenue, using the staff's top dollar per square foot selling price that they used to evaluate the economic hardship, would be a stretch to sell for $538,000. And in our opinion, in the owner's opinion, that amount is a stretch, as 804 Shelby does not have a very appealing front elevation as compared to the comparison houses. With a purchase price of $463,000, it does not leave a lot of room for the owners to fix up a property and bring it into compliance with the Department of Codes and Building Safety. In conclusion, the owners are under the impression that it all boils down to whether or not the structure would be an economic hardship to restore, not one's opinion of economic hardship. The staff reports state that economic hardship is not based on personal hardship, whether the construction would be cheaper, new construction would be cheaper, or the ability to realize the highest and best use. The owners agree with the Department of Codes and Building Safety that restoring this structure is impractical and would be an economic hardship to require renovation to this structure. As much as the owners appreciate the staff's recommendation for a higher and best use on this property by suggesting the possibility of an addition to further increase market value, the owners would rather stick to the evaluation of the house in its current economic hardship condition, not hypotheticals. The facts as it pertains to 804 Shelby are this. The house totally renovated would sell for $538,000 to $559,000. The cost to restore this house to match the houses at the price point in the staff report would cost around $207,000 to $239,000, plus the cost to repair foundation and cost to mitigate the mold before renovation could begin. When adding these costs together with the purchase price, we're well over $725,000. The owners would have to list this house for nearly $775,000 just to cover the realtor fees and break even. In essence, just like the Department of Codes and Building Safety stated, restoration of this structure is economically impractical. The owners are asking to approve demolition of the structure so they can begin working together with both departments to help improve the Nashville community by designing homes that would reflect and represent the district's architectural and historic character. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Okay, no questions of the applicant right now. Okay, open public hearing. Right, and I think council member, would this be one of yours that you would like to speak to? Okay, thank you. Sure, no, go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alice Forrester, 803 Fatherland, and I'm the current president of Historic Edgefield. I want to start by saying this was just really a good experience to work with the staff and the commission on, again, another attempt in demolishing a contributing historic house in our neighborhood. We're deeply concerned. Our overlay is what has sustained our neighborhood and what makes it also so attractive to development and people coming in. So I just want to say, working with Joseph and the staff, the communication and the report is excellent. We strongly, I didn't sign up for my 5 minutes because I was so happy with the report, but really oppose this demolition. I visited the house. My husband and I and many of us neighbors know historic houses. This is totally restorable. We're happy to support large addition. And I think the lot itself, as I'm seeing, easily could be worth $400,000. I want to make one other quick point. I still think the economic hardship aspect, we would love to define it a little better. The house is the hardship, but who actually provides the information on why it has a hardship? It's only the applicant. And I'd love to see an independent third party, somebody that knows historic construction, not just an engineering report. And one last thing, I've pulled a lot of realtor reports on the 804 Shelby. One quote, "This is verified as a to-build with certain city restrictions." I never saw a mention of a historic neighborhood, historic overlay, and the neighborhood worked in the past to have some sort of red flag with realtors. I know there's internet sites now, but maybe that would help a buyer to realize there really is a full historic overlay and that there are restrictions on anything predating, I forget if it's 1940 or 50. So anyways, I thank you for your time and thank you to the staff, and I really look forward to working together more closely, and I think we're on the right path. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Ms. Forrester.
I also would like to speak in favor of the Commission's recommendation for demolition. The Neighborhood Association.
Mr. Hubler.
Has been, thank you, Minette.
Can you complete your name and address too, sir? Thank you.
Jim Hubler, 607 Fatherland Street in historic Edgefield.
Thank you, sir.
The neighborhood has been in a historic zone district since the 1970s. It's the first one in the county. And any realtor should have known that before they were selling a property in that neighborhood, that there are restrictions on what can be done. And I just want to endorse the Commission's recommendations and hope that it's followed through. Thank you.
Thank you. Who is also Commissioner on the Metro Historic Commission, so thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Brett Withers, Metro Council District 6. My address is 1113 Granada. Just want to thank neighbors for coming out, and also want to thank the Historic Zoning Commission staff. When this report came through, I had recommended that we try to schedule a walkthrough with staff if we could, because I think that's very helpful for everyone, and especially the commissioners, I'm sure, to see the property. And I'm glad that everyone was able to work together to get that scheduled. I thought that was very helpful. For this property, and this happens a fair amount in some of our neighborhoods, particularly when we have neighbors who may have sometimes physical disabilities or getting to advanced age, and sometimes they are no longer in the home or they pass away, and are getting to a state at which they are not able to maintain the home. And this is one of those examples. The Codes Department had been noticing for this property that there was high grass and weeds, the roof was in poor condition, that some repairs were needed, and in this case, as happens with some of those as property standards, they send abate notices, which primarily go to the house itself. If there's not a person there to receive those abate notices, it can be difficult for the codes department to find someone to work with to get a plan to bring the building up to back into compliance with applicable codes. And that's what happens here. It sounds like, unfortunately, the prior homeowner had passed away. Sometimes at that point, what codes, the only option that they have left, if no one, if there's not a family member or something like that folks know for the property, their only recourse then is to work through the courts. And so, as this is another example where the court did hear the case, it's been going through codes for probably 2 years now, I would think. However, it is still the case. Sometimes when the court filing is filed, that is when someone will come forward to claim the property, especially if they're not local. It's just, again, unless someone is there checking that mail, if there's not another forwarding address, it's difficult for codes to get in touch with someone to repair the property. So at some point, apparently after the court filing was done, someone came forward and was able to claim the property, and then it sold, and I believe it sold again. So the reason that the demolition order is from the court is partly just trying to come up with a plan to get this building restored. It's not necessarily that the court is ordering demolition. The court still defers to the Historic Zoning Commission, to this body, for an approval of the demolition order itself. I can see how that could be maybe confusing to someone, but just with the way that the property standards goes is they start trying to deal with a roof and grass, and sometimes neighborhoods can help with that. But if there's no one present in the house, or there's not a known family member, it can be difficult. So that is where we get to the condition that we're at. However, like I said, it went through the codes process to try to find someone to take possession of the property then sold at what I think is a pretty high dollar value for the size of the structure and the condition that it's in. Currently, we were able to schedule the walkthrough with staff. I think many of us in some of these neighborhoods have seen houses in this condition or much, much worse, and I've stated that my house is not in a whole lot better condition than this one because it needs some work and I need to do some chores. But nonetheless, I'm pretty convinced that based on our walkthrough that this is not a candidate for demolition. I do believe that the staff analysis is correct, that the economic hardship is largely self-imposed by the purchase price that was paid for the house in the condition that it was in and the size that it is. It wouldn't, sometimes the historic houses, particularly if they have at least a 1.5 story form, it's a little easier to do an addition to them. This one is not going to be as easy to do an addition like that. But again, that was a known factor of this house at the time that the purchase was made. And so I find that the economic hardship is self-imposed, and that there's not anything in this structure that many of us have not seen and worked on our own houses. So that seems to be reasonable, particularly with the market in East Nashville being the way that it is today. It seems reasonable that it would not be difficult to do at least basic repairs to the structure to get it up to a point of a sale. So I support the staff recommendation and thank neighbors for being willing to come out and take a look at the property, and for staff working with us, and for commissioners to come out as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Withers. It's good to thank you for the history of codes and how they have been working on that property for 2 years. And I think, that is possibly, as the applicant said, it might be a little confusing on why there's this dissonance on that. But thank you for that clarification, because it does help the information. Anyone else for public comment? Okay, close public hearing.
Madam Chair, if I may ask applicant a clarifying question regarding the property and appraisal and so forth?
Yes, thank you.
So I was looking at your application as well as appraisal. So appraisal was dated January 17th. And a report was submitted January 28th. So in that, residential appraisal report, the owner was stated Bars Hooper Holding LLC. and then borrower as BWB West LLC. And so that appraisal was based on the condition of remodeling, or rather demolish and rebuild modern housing as of January 8th. So as far as you understand, your owner's intent is always purchase and demolish and rebuild those submitted the design with a modern-looking house. That's based on the appraisal.
When you say the appraisal, what value is that appraisal are you referring to?
I think the value was 700. Let me see. Somewhere around 745,000 after the rebuild.
Yeah, I apologize. I don't know what the owners and that information, what they said. What I can say is the owner's intent, based on what they had investigated with property and codes, with the demolition order and the movement towards the demolition order, that they were under the impression and knowing that it wasn't a historic district. We did have knowledge of that before. It was a preservation overlay that was not clearly listed. So we thought the owners thought they would just have to come in and meet historic appearances, and the intent was to, believing that was going to be demolished, that they would then demolish that and rebuild according to the historic codes, a new structure on that building. So the appraisal, there may have been some confusion. I don't know on that appraisal. What I remember them talking about was there was an appraisal when they went to purchase the property. That was like around $450,000, which was the current market value.
Yeah, let me stop you right there.
Yeah.
Because it's in your staff report, appraisal was, it clearly state based on the new housing after demolish and then rebuild according to a submitted plan. That's appraisal stated.
That each new structure?
Yes.
Then yes, the appraisal of the new structure of, I think, around 2,000 square feet would be projected to be, what would you say, that 700 and 800? 700
to probably 800, 750 to 800.
Yes, that would be, okay. So the intent would be to build two structures.
Yes, it is based on the new construction.
Yeah, based on new construction, yeah.
So next question is, I am trying to understand all the transaction, because according to your testament, you said the owner is acquitted this property December of 14th of 2021. But the deed says the deed was executed both on December 31st, 2021 from the previous individual owner to Buzz Hooper Holdings. And the purchase or close sales price is $362,500. And on the same day, another deed was executed from Buzz Hooper Holdings to B West LLC. The sales price is $463,500 on the same day. So what kind of transaction took place in December, and then why deed was executed on the same day, increased price of more than $110,000? What's the history behind that?
I'm not familiar with the history with Buzz Holdings. From my understanding, there's companies or groups that will find distressed properties. They'll get it under contract and do a simultaneous closing. Basically wholesale the deal to somebody else. So all we knew is that Buzz Holdings had a property for sale for the price that the owners purchased it at. We don't have any recollection of what their business dealings were with the previous owner. So when it would be a simultaneous assignment of contract and execution on that same day, from my understanding.
Yeah, but at the same time, the appraisal was based on the new construction, and owner at that time, as of dated January 8th, the owner was stated Buzz Hooper Holdings, then borrower as B West LLC. That's the appraisal. So I'm trying to understand what's going on over there. So it seems like owner is purchased this property not knowing, but intent was always demolish and rebuild, replace with modern structure.
Yes, I mean, that, again, we stated that was the intent, was to purchase the property, demolish, understanding that was the process that was already in place with the Building and Codes Department, that they were moving to have hearings for demolition. And so that was the intent. After review to purchase, demolish, and build 2 structures, yes.
Thank you. No further question for you. Thank you. So if I may, with this, whole transaction based on the appraisal and based on the not historically familiar engineering report, because I have not seen any evidence with the foundation need to be replaced, or this report from engineer does not specify which area or how to remedy those deterioration. Just instead need to be demolished. So that's it. And also another report came from AFS. So that is a water mitigation around the property. It does not address any remedy or any recommendation of the foundation or, wall or nothing. It says waterproof outside of the property. So for that, I think all the information to meet with economic hardship is incomplete, because when we talk about economic hardship, we compare to demolish, rebuild versus compliance. So what needs to be done to make the house in line with the design guideline and structurally sound. So there's no enough information to satisfy economic hardship, and also seems like the plan is always demolish. So there's no intent to follow historic overlay guideline. And so in that sense, I think this one is rather self-imposed hardship, because anybody who purchased the property should do minimum homework. Just because there was a letter or just because outside is not well kept, it's not automatically accepted for the demolition. So for that sense, I think pretty much the hardship is self-imposed. So therefore, I am in support of the staff recommendation for not meeting with economic hardship demolition guideline.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner Johnson and Commissioner Bell and I went and looked at the property, and we, as you can imagine, we probably do this quite often, and it was not apparent to me that the building was structurally unsound. I'm not an engineer, but I do have experience in looking at these kinds of buildings, and so for that reason, I would support staff recommendations.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I wasn't able to attend the walkthrough, but from what I've seen in Commissioner Johnson's in-depth analysis, it's quite apparent to me this is a non-starter for us. The buyer did not do their due diligence, and they wildly overpaid for a building that needs a lot of work. So that's entirely on the property owner for a self-imposed economic hardship, and totally support the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Taffy.
Yeah, with respect to 804 Shelby Avenue, I move for approval of the staff recommendation, which is disapproval of the request for demolition of the property based on economic hardship and the testimony here today.
Commissioner Mosley has made a motion.
Second.
And Commissioner Price has seconded. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes. Thank you, applicant.
Okay.
Jenny, before you start, I'm just going to make sure I check in with my commissioners. It's 3:45. We'll listen to this and maybe take a break. That would be great. So this is going to be a long one. All right.
Take a break now or after?
Yeah, I think maybe we should take a break.
Okay.
And thank you for your patience, audience. We've been almost going 2 hours, so we do need to take a break. So let's do 10 minutes. Thank you.
For economic hardship. The applicant is requesting demolition of this structure at 114 2nd Avenue South. The building was constructed around 1880. At least as early as 1883, the building was home to the Schreier and Alfred Sale and Field. The two men dissolved their partnership in 1894 due to Alfred being ill. Ghosting of early painted signage can be seen on the left side that says Schreier and Alfred, horses and mules, bought and sold. In 1897, it was Sneed's Livery, Feed, and Sale Stable. The property has experienced many changes over time, including the loss of its ornamental cornice, the reduction in height of the second floor windows, the enclosure of a first floor opening, and alterations to the main entry. A facade repair occurred on the front elevation around 2016, which involved rebuilding the top portion of this elevation. On the interior, the second floor, which was tied to the walls and helped to provide structural stability, was removed at some point over history. The applicant for this request is the property owner next door at 120 2nd Avenue South. The two property owners are involved in a legal dispute over the condition of the subject property. The owner next door has approval to construct a new structure in this vacant parking lot you can see here. However, when work first commenced in 2018, the property owner at 114 2nd Avenue South raised concerns that jackhammering in the street was damaging their building and that if work continued, the structure may collapse. The building was evaluated at that time by structural engineer Mark Buchanan, and it was determined that due to the condition of 114, the construction at 120 could not safely resume. As part of the proposed settlement between property owners, the owner next door would like to purchase this property, demolish it, and redevelop both of the lots. The applicant has provided an engineering report from Mr. Buchanan evaluating the condition of the structure. He expresses concern about the condition of the south wall, which was crumbling when he initially assessed the building in 2018. At that time, the mortar had deteriorated such that bricks could be removed by hand. The wall was out of plumb and leaning away from the building. On the interior, the mortar was significantly deteriorated as well. Since that time, shotcrete was sprayed onto the south wall. This was not properly secured, and while it provides some waterproofing, the added load is further destabilizing the wall, increasing the likelihood of collapse. Mr. Buchanan also indicated concerns with the foundation, which is comprised of a dry stacked limestone. Mr. Buchanan states that the south wall is composed of 3 layers of old bricks with sand in between them, balancing on dry stacked limestone rocks, with a heavy layer of shotcrete without any structural support sprayed over them. Review of the rear and left side elevations in 2018 showed extensive crack patterns and missing and loose mortar. Since this time, the walls have been improperly repointed with a thin layer of mortar without the failed mortar being raked out of the joints. Mr. Buchanan concludes that for the building to be safe, the foundation would need to be replaced. The south, rear, and north walls would all need to be removed and reconstructed, and the roof would need to be tied to all 4 walls. Staff, myself included, recently visited the structure with Mr. Buchanan. Unfortunately, some of the conditions were difficult to observe because of the application of the shotcrete, the repointing of the north and rear walls, and the construction of an interior wall over the brick on the inside of the south wall. However, staff finds the 2018 photographs compelling, and there was clear evidence of the failing mortar under the thin repointing on the north and rear walls, and staff could observe a small section of the south wall on the interior and saw the condition of the mortar.
Staff finds that if the foundation must be replaced, along with rebuilding the roof and 3 of the 4 walls, leaving only the 1 wall that has already been heavily altered, then very little historic fabric will remain, and the building will have lost historic integrity. Based on this, staff finds the building meets Section 5.3 of the design guidelines for appropriate demolition. Going through the criteria for economic hardship, staff finds that Section 1 is incomplete and Sections 3, 4, 5, and 6 are missing, but not necessary based on the compelling evidence of the engineering report and visual review of the property. Section 8 may not have been met. However, the issue for this case is not the cost of repairs, but the inability to repair. The application was presented as an economic hardship request based on the fact that the building is historic. Repair would likely not be possible for any owner at any purchase price or cost. So in conclusion, staff recommends approval of demolition based on the inability to rehabilitate the building while maintaining historic integrity and the fact that all necessary repairs will result in a non-contributing structure. I know the applicant is here and would like to speak, but do you have questions for me first?
Thank you, Jenny. Applicant?
Thank you, members of the commission. I'm Jim Murphy, 1600 Division Street on behalf of the applicant. As Ms. Warren has pointed out, this is a somewhat unusual request because the request is being made by an adjoining owner to demolish a building next door. And typically the owner is the applicant. And obviously, as she described, this property, the 2 properties are involved in litigation, and we're trying to resolve that litigation. My client, 122nd Avenue South, doesn't want to acquire the property and then come in and ask for a demolition permit, because then they're going to say, well, you should have known when you bought it that it was in bad condition. And so we know it's in bad condition now. And
Thank you for that.
I just heard that. So, it's not beyond the pale that that's what the issue was going to be. So obviously, the idea here is that my client doesn't want to proceed unless he's got an understanding of the condition. The staff has done an excellent job of describing all the various conditions. I've got with me and they can answer questions if you have them. Mr. Buchanan, who is a structural engineer who did the reports, he's actually done 2 reports that staff mentioned in the staff report. Also, Mark Robin, the architect, who discussed the changes to the historical context of the building over time. And then the owners of 122nd Avenue South, Frank and Ivy May, are also here with me. So they're here in case there's any questions that you might have that I can't answer, which that's probably going to be the case. So that's why Mr. Buchanan's here, because most of this really comes down to the structural. I gave you some photographs, but really they're basically the same photographs that staff has shown you today that show the conditions of the wall. As Ms. Warren described, when the first group of photographs were taken of the south wall, that was before the shotcrete was installed. You could see through the wall into the interior. There were bricks missing and on the ground. The mortar was basically sand, very soft and not providing any support. After the shotcrete was installed, I provided some pictures that show cracks in the shotcrete. And as Mr. Buchanan noted, adding the shotcrete actually provides more stress on the wall because the wall is still unsupported. My client was so concerned about the condition of the wall that he's placed a fence in his parking lot to prevent cars from parking adjacent to the wall because he's afraid it's going to collapse. And since he knows the wall is dangerous, he's afraid of liability. So as a result, he's put a fence in the parking lot to keep the cars from being damaged or people being injured if the wall were to collapse. As Mr. Buchanan's report noted, the movement in the wall that he's observed from 2018 to 2022, the wall has moved more. That's shown in some of the pictures, particularly some of the pictures I have of the roof. It shows the roof joist separating further from the building walls. So Again, the photographs, I think, tell the story that this building is in a very dangerous condition. It's a safety hazard for not only for my client, but for anybody on 2nd Avenue in front of the building. And so Mr. Buchanan, as staff noted, has concluded that really the only way to fix this condition would be to take down the walls and replace the foundation. That would probably also require the removal of the front wall to replace the foundation. So really all the walls would end up coming down, at least 3 of them. And as staff noted, when you take down the walls, this building will lose its historic context. And so for that reason, it's no longer contributing and demolition is appropriate. So unless y'all have questions for me or my staff or my group of consultants, we'll be happy to answer them, but that's all we have.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicant at the moment? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Open public hearing. Anyone else to speak on this project? Okay. Close public hearing. Commissioners?
I worked extensively with Mark Buchanan and have tremendous respect for his analysis. And if you're not familiar with him, just looking at the photographs tells a lot. And I'm in concurrence with staff recommendation on this one.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
I'll add, I'm particularly compelled by the maybe well-intended application of shotcrete, but you take a slurry like that and put it on the side of a wall that's already weak and there's no foundation under it. That is very problematic, maybe more so than it appears even in the pictures. So the continued movement of the building is not a surprise, and certainly the photographs prior to the application of the shotcrete show a particular deterioration at the base of the wall, as opposed, higher up, seen maybe in just visually in better condition, which structurally, if the things on the bottom aren't in good condition, the things on the top, that just doesn't, for those who are not experienced, that doesn't usually work out really well. So I'm compelled by those photographs and the staff's analysis of this as well.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
So, I had a pleasure visiting and actually observing these pictures in person. So not only this brick deterioration, but a very interesting fact is outside of the building, all the way around, I found a very cute star mark, and I thought it was really decorative. And then later on found out when I come to inside, there was connected with metal and bolt. And then in the bolt, there's a metal piece connecting, or rather securing the wall from movement via metal and nuts and bolt, and really heavy metal object. So I think it's beyond picture, and so I think it's not economic hardship, rather meet with Section B53, and building is not appropriate for the demolition. So I'm in support of the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson and Commissioner Mayhall and I. Just for disclosures, that we did look at the property as well. So we did a walkthrough.
Yeah, unfortunately, I agree with Mr. Buchanan's report and the applicant's request, and it's unfortunate. Occasionally, we do have these situations. It reminds me of the Trail West building a couple of years ago, and there was some different situation sort of with that one, but similar in that basically gravity is the only thing holding up this building, and that's unfortunate and not much that can be done about it. So begrudgingly, I agree with the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Well, I think many of you know that I've been in this area since 1984, and I remember when it was the old Ace clubs, and when I was in my 30s, I would go over there and dance. They had men and women dancing in cages, not lasciviously, but just to get the crew dancing, and so I've got a great deal of fondness for this building. And because of that, and my experience, I live in a building, it was built in 1852, and the architect who developed the building went to the corner and there were trees growing out of it, and the walls were moving, and so, but our foundation is solid. I've looked at our building, it's solid. But given my love for red brick and the fact that we don't have much red brick in the area left, I'm going to have to, I'll defer to my fellow commissioners, but I'll need to abstain from this vote.
Duly noted, Commissioner. I think the staff recommendation and also the presentation by the applicant is very compelling, and also doing the walkthrough. And again, as public knows, our commission is that we are very aware of demolitions that come before us and are very thought through about how we assess a demolition, as you saw as well on 804 Shelby. So I know that this commission will make the best decision.
Well, with due respect to Commissioner Mayhall, I mean, it does break all of our hearts to see these old buildings go away, but there does come a time when restoration is not possible on this. And so with respect to 114 2nd Avenue South, I move for approval with staff recommendation.
The Vice Chair has made a motion. There's a second by Commissioner Johnson. All in favor? Okay. And I think we have the 4 votes that we need legal. And I do not see any opposition except for a recuse or an abstain. So the motion passes. So thank you again, applicant. We appreciate it, and staff for working diligently with this demolition request.
Sorry about that. Okay. So the next application is for 0 North 11th Street, which is the northeast corner of North 11th and Forest Avenue. The application is for a townhouse development on this northeast corner. The existing context is pretty mixed. Directly to the north is a former 4-square house that had a commercial front added to it several years prior to the overlay, decades ago. And then there's a large church building just to the north of that. And then directly across the street is the Carnegie Library. Caddy Corner, which is the top photo, is a residential structure. It's now used as a bar, and then some commercial structures. And you can see beyond that townhouses that the commission approved a couple years ago now. And then the bottom photo shows the north side of North 11th Street, south side of Forest Street. And it is, again, directly across the street from the proposed project. And that is single-family houses in form, but most of these houses, at least the first 3 or 4, are used for commercial purposes. And then on the other side of the alley from the site are single-family houses, maybe a duplex house, and these are all still used as residences. So that's just kind of a background, kind of showing where everything is. And here, again, is the site in question. So just a little bit of background, again, in April 2021, MHCC approved a mixed-use development for this lot that included commercial space and townhouses. So what you're seeing here is not what is being proposed now, but this is what the commission previously approved. So I just wanted to have a little bit of background there so you can kind of see what was previously approved on the lot. So, but this is the proposal. So here is the proposed site plan. The application is for 6 townhouses that are 2 stories at the front with a recessed 3rd story. There's a 1-story garage element to the right along Forest Avenue, and the vehicular access is via the alley in the rear of the property, and that will also be, so you kind of would turn in from off of Forest into the alley, and that's how you would access the parking for the site. Here's the first floor plan. The plan shows that there are no door or entrance on North 11th Street, and Steph finds that this is a pretty prominent location and street, and a lot of the other structures kind of to north of it face North 11th Street, so we are recommending that an entrance or some sort of orientation to North 11th Street be added to the design. Here are the elevations. The two-story with a recessed third-story scale matches the scale of the previously approved infill on the site. The overall height is similar to what was previously approved for the site as well. The commission finds the height and scale of the development to be appropriate because of the unique context of North 11th Street, which is mixed use, and because the third story is stepped back 10 feet from Forest Avenue and 8 feet from North 11th Street. In addition, the development steps down to just 1 story in scale as it approaches the historic houses across the alley on the north side of Forest Avenue. The infill does not have any entries on North 11th Street. Again, since, as I said earlier, since North 11th Street is such a major spine through the commercial Five Points neighborhood, we are recommending that there be a entry off of 11th Street to kind of address and provide orientation to North 11th Street. Staff finds that a corner entrance could be okay there. It doesn't necessarily have to be right on, on 11th, but at the corner would be appropriate as well. On Forest Avenue, there are side entries inside a small vestibule area to each of the 6 houses. You might be able to see it better here in the floor plan. And similarly, staff feels that, having some sort of orientation and direct entrance onto the street would help provide, be more in keeping with the historic context and provide better orientation and would better address the street. So we're recommending that those doors face Forest Avenue. Also wanted to point out that the entrances are marked with canopies. These canopies may extend over the property line into the right-of-way, over the sidewalk, and will likely require an aerial encroachment that may not be approved by council. So that's not necessarily your commission's purview, but just as a heads up that the canopies could be an issue that needs to go to council for the aerial encroachment. Here are the side and the rear elevations. And just here are some rendering of the projects. Just wanted to also note that they're showing here a tan brick. We would need to approve any brick color or any brick sample. I question whether or not we would approve a brick that looks like this, but without seeing a sample, I don't know. But just the brick that you're seeing may not be an actual representation of what the staff would ultimately approve. And so in conclusion, staff is recommending approval of the project with the conditions that the finished floor height be consistent with the finished floor heights of the adjacent houses to be verified by MHCC in the field. An entrance be added to North 11th Street facade, and the entries on Forest Avenue face that street. MHCC approve all HVAC units and other utility locations, and then MHCC approve all masonry samples, windows and doors, and the materials for the entryway floors and the driveway prior to purchase installation. Happy to answer any questions, and I know that the applicant is here. You also did receive some public comment, one from the Neighborhood Association and one from a neighbor.
I have a general question. Sure. Is it our purview in this, under this conservation overlay for painting of the brick?
We would allow, or we would not review the painting of the brick, but all the same, whether or not they intend to paint it, we want to review a sample and make sure it meets our standards, just because somebody in the future could come off and want to take off the paint on the brick. So, so regardless of whether or not they plan to paint it, it still needs to be approved by us.
Okay.
Another brick question, that you typically approve some shade of red, right? I mean, it's
typically, you do find in Laughlin Springs some kind of buff tannish bricks. So we'd have to see, an example. So, yeah.
But you're strongly recommending a red color.
A red brick would most certainly, not all red bricks. We have standards, but, a color in the red family be more likely to be approved than a tan one. But again, we want to see a sample for all of them, because you do see some kind of yellowish buff tan bricks historically, but that's not the predominant style.
So the reasoning would be like if they took the paint off, you'd still have red brick?
Yes. You still have a brick that met our standards. So just the color is just one part of it. When we're looking at a brick sample, that's one of the main things we look at, but we're looking at the size of the brick, the shape of the brick, whether or not sometimes the style is to have a brick that's very overly tumbled and has kind of mortar splashed on it, that type of thing. So there's many things we look at.
Okay, thank you. Applicant, are you here?
My name is Bo Brady. I'm with Southeast Venture Design, and I live at 3724 Burris Street. As Historic mentioned, we had this project previously approved with a different architect at the time. The property owner then asked us to kind of take over the design, kind of take it through construction documents and finish the design of it, as the previous design was more of like a white box model, so we wanted to kind of give it some more life. So we kind of met with Historic initially just to talk about what, the requirements and approvals that they gave for the original design were, so we could adhere to that. And then we also met with Councilman Councilman Withers on site to kind of review his thoughts on the project, and we're appreciative of their help and support of it. The one thing we wanted to talk about is that, this is a project that is a little bit of a constrained site is when it comes to the orientation of it. I mean, facing, I don't know if we can pull up the site on a previous. So it's very elongated, but we did want to kind of maintain that similar look that the original design had. So one of the reasons why we wanted to step the building down to have that garage portion was not only for ability to increase the value of the parking for those residents, but also this being more of a transient site between the retail areas on Gallatin, but the neighbors down past the alley, we wanted to kind of step it down to kind of help transition from a taller height to a more residential feel. And, to touch on some of the recommendations that they have on the height, they mentioned measuring it from existing historic homes. With this being a townhome project, we don't really see that as being an accurate representation of what they should be. I mean, these were 1930 homes that are either a single story or 1.5 story. And with this being a townhome project, we don't really see how you can measure the height. I think if we could look at revising that recommendation or reconsidering it to be more related to the existing historic structure that's set to the north of it, that might be a little bit more approachable when it comes to the design of this project. And then similarly with the orientation, we're not showing a blank facade along 11th Avenue. We have windows that, face that frontage. We are open to doing a corner entry if we have to. But, we don't necessarily want to put an entry directly in the middle of that North 11th Street entry point, because it would kind of be detrimental to the design of the project. Because right now we're primarily facing all the units on Forest Avenue. And then when we talk about the choice of materials, we totally agree with having samples to approve. But if you look at the neighboring context of the houses, they're either a vinyl siding with various colors. We do have some neighboring houses that are a red brick, but then you also have some that are a painted brick or a different color brick. They actually did just paint the adjacent historic structure to like a beige or a taupe color. So we felt, if we match with using a more natural brick color that's like a taupe, we think that would be more reasonable to fit in with the existing building there. And I think they mentioned that there was a project that was previously approved a couple years ago on 1012 Main This is a very similar project when it comes to the size and design and form, and they were approved with a white painted brick, which I don't see any difference between that and using a natural tone brick when it comes to that versus a red brick. So I think we would just want to discuss potentially removing the requirement for it to be a red brick, considering that there's not really much context in this surrounding vicinity that's all red brick. I think that's all we had when it comes to the recommendations. Let me see. Yeah, I think that's all I had. I can take some questions.
Bo, am I reading the site plan correctly? There's about 5 feet of grade change along Forest Street. Is it plus or minus from moving towards 11th?
From the building portion, yes, but if you take it from where 11th Street starts to where our alley is, it's almost 10 feet.
Okay.
So we are having to step the building up as we move closer to the alley. So that does obviously make the building look a little bit taller as you get closer, but that's why we introduced the screen wall there for the parking area, so you don't see that from the street, and it kind of represents a lower scale as you move closer to the single family.
And mine, which I don't take issue with, I think that in order to provide accessible entry, which I'm guessing that's what the sort of the back is between you and the adjoining property, as an at-grade level entry, kind of all the way across the back. There's no
that's right
series of stairs there.
Right.
And so there's what? Is each house is each townhome going to be built at a different level, or are there about 3 or 4 steps?
Yeah, I think there's 3 steps in total. I think every 2 we step it up a couple feet.
Gotcha. And so the indication of the 3 steps at the front to get to the level landing at the door is correct. There's no variance in the way that each unit sort of jumps up, and the 3 steps to get to the door, that's all correct in terms of how the grades are actually going to work.
That's right. Yeah, we're trying to, with as constrained as this street or this parcel is, we're very limited on what we can do when it comes to the entry points. So we really just have to get as close to grade as we can and just step it up as we go up the street.
And I had a question for the staff too about matching and how you sort of tie that many structures together. That there's certainly some variation in that and what the standard that will be applied to that. It's a pretty typical condition, and I think certainly the nature of the development will be taken into account, but the staff can certainly speak to that as to how that would be enforced in the field. Thanks for clarifying that. That was all I had.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions to the applicant at the moment? Okay, thank you. Open public hearing. Close. Open public hearing. Yep. Thank you, Commissioner.
Hello, my name is Sarah Fotopoulos, and I live at 1108 Forest Avenue, across the street from that, one house up. That block of Forest Avenue is the transition zone between the commercial, which is clearly commercial on the other side of 11th, and the residential, the historic residential area on the other side of 12th. All of the current houses, all of the current structures on Forest in that block are single-family homes. Some have been divided into duplexes historically. I don't think any of them are duplexes at the moment. I don't really know the answer to that. But they look like single-family homes. They're all historic homes with the proper design, and you all take care of making sure that they maintain their historic nature. The place where that structure is proposed currently is a sloped grassed area with some big, beautiful trees. So as you turn onto Forest from 11th, you see this, what looks like a park with big trees. Over on the right-hand side are single-family structures that are mixed use. Some of them have gone commercial, semi-commercial, but they look like houses. My house is the next house right on the dividing line there. There's an alley across here, and then all of the rest of Forest is single-family structures with lawns, trees, vegetation, flowers, and they're stepped back from the street so that they look like houses.
Just want to make sure you've got 9 seconds.
The problem with that for me, because I'm looking at it, is that, may I continue just a minute?
Just your closing statement.
Thank you. It's all one big facade, the whole half of the block. The 6, although I thought I counted 5 townhomes, a continuous line, your vision, it's all one big wall of structure, and then there are houses. It's not a transition at all. If the garage, instead of being cut down, could be moved back a little bit, so visually it looked like there was a little more room with a big tree or something right there instead of more brick or concrete or whatever it's going to be, would make a better transition to the structures. We all have to accommodate the commercial, but we don't want the commercial to really invade, and that looks like that's what's happening. So,
Thank you very much. I appreciate your comments. Anyone else? Council member?
Thank you again, Commissioners. Brett Withers, Metro Council District 6. My address is 1113 Granada. Just want to kind of recap. I think that all of y'all were on the commission when the prior application went through. When the East Nashville community was working on the 5 Points redevelopment district in the 90s, they worked on design guidelines that had sub-districts that had different characteristics. And so there is a sub-district that very uncreatively was called the 5 Point sub-district. But what that sub-district called for was buildings built more or less to the sidewalk that were 2 stories with a 3rd floor step back. That was more or less a townhome kind of a product, and that was primarily what was called for in the 5 Points subdistrict. There was another subdistrict that's called the residential subdistrict, and the residential subdistrict said that if you were going to build, it doesn't govern use, but that if you were going to build an office building, that it would need to have a residential form, a little bit of a deeper front yard kind of a placement. You would have a rhythm and spacing very similar to residential. And when you go down 11th Street, a little bit further south, I think a real example of that in the residential subdistrict would be the Wagon Wheel Title building that was approved. It was built in a 4-square form, but it has a deeper front yard. It has a front porch. It has the side setbacks, and it blends in with otherwise residential stuff. One of the curiosities of this layout was that, for instance, the buildings across the street, which have had commercial zoning since at least 85, were part of that residential subdistrict. But then when you get to this block face, it was placed in the 5 Point subdistrict. So again, like there was an option that the community had to say that this, where you've got Woodland Presbyterian Church and then the 4-square building, they had an option of placing it within a residential subdistrict that said it should have a residential form with yards, but that's not what was selected. What was selected was the 5 Point subdistrict, which called basically for townhomes, which is what you see. And so with the property owner that had owned that for quite a long time, as the redevelopment district was moving toward its expiration date in December of 2020, that's something that he had discussed with me as well as with the Lockland Springs Neighborhood Association. And we've had a lot of work on that application with staff as well. But that's the reason why the prior application had that sort of a mixed-use commercial or townhouse style at that location. And the neighborhood association at that time did work quite a bit on some of the details of that plan and did write a letter in support of that application. So the properties traded hands, and I met with the new team and asked them to stay kind of as close to that as which was approved as they could. And I think largely they have. I do note that the Lockland Springs Board wrote a letter in opposition to this plan this time, and I do want to take that seriously. I know that we've had a little thing going on in East Nashville called the Tomato Arts Fest this weekend, so a lot of folks are volunteering and busy with that. But they did send a letter in with some opposition to this version of the plan. I think for me, I would just really think that perhaps if the team would work a little bit more with the neighborhood association, that we could get to a point of agreement. But I do note that concern from the neighborhood association. A couple things I will kind of speak to. One is that the neighborhood actually was supportive of the corner commercial piece, and the Historic Zoning Commission does not review use, so you can't require that. But I think that was an asset to the prior plan, is that it created a little bit of a focal point right there at that corner, which was reduced in scale with the awnings that were included for it, and that transitioned into the townhouses to the east. So the neighborhood at that time viewed that as being an asset, and I think the staff report noting that there's not really an entrance on the 11th Street side also kind of speaks to that. The 11th is the primary street, and I think the team has done a good job with glazing on that, but there's not an entrance there, and so it still feels like a little bit of a dead zone from the 11th Street side. One thing I would also maybe point out is that the prior application for the doorways had one of the neighborhood requests that they have a little bit of a wider kind of an alcove, so that there'd be like a small garden space within that to introduce some green space along the Forest Avenue facade, and that's not really as present in this one, which may or may not be something that could be worked out. But I think the prior application had, rather than sort of more or less one facade with change of materials, that had deeper recessed alcoves, which had a little bit of a green space in it to have to break up that massing from forest. And this one, one thing about the prior application is that it was going to actually excavate the site and introduce a drive aisle down the rear so that each of those units had pull-under garages, which, would literally excavate the site. I think a downside to that is that you would have the pull-under garages, and then the units, as they face the street, sometimes those rooms aren't really always used a lot. And so when you go down the street, sometimes with the townhouses where most of the first floor is actually a car garage, it doesn't really seem activated. So I think that was maybe a detriment to the prior plan that is an improvement on this plan, that it is more at grade level, and you probably do have living space right there. So I think that's an improvement here. And the way that this proposal has accommodated the off-street parking, which is definitely going to be needed, is with the parking structure toward the alley, which in general is a good thing. The the Lockland Springs Neighborhood Association's letter kind of felt like it sort of is a wall that, I think, again, the team has done a good job of introducing things that kind of repeat a glazing pattern. I kind of think that's a novel idea. One thing I would maybe suggest to folks is that, your options are that you could have just an exposed parking lot, or you could have a privacy fence, or you could have something that at least tries to maintain a street presence. And I think this is a novel approach, but I think it's one that's worth exploring, although I think that the actual setbacks maybe off of Forest could be looked at a little bit more. But so again, I just want to recap that history from the redevelopment district that the neighborhood worked on quite a bit in the 90s, specifically called for this kind of a design at this specific location. The prior plan had maybe a little bit more neighborhood involvement at the outset, and working with staff for having the townhomes, but having a little bit more of a street activation on 11th and a little bit more green space on the Forest Avenue side. And since those couple elements are not present, I think that those are primary differences that may be leading to the different outcome and support from the neighborhood association. I think those can be worked out. I just don't know if the commission feels that you could reach that through conditioning today. But if not, I believe that we can continue working with the neighborhood association to come up with an acceptable plan pretty soon. So thank you.
Thank you. We always appreciate your time here, Councilman Withers. Anyone else? Yeah. One question. Did the applicant have any time for rebuttal? Sean, who was keeping time? He had some time. Okay, very good. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Stephen Fotopoulos. I'm at 1206 Forest, And just briefly, I'd like to stand in opposition to the proposal in this current form. It's a vacant lot. Of course, it's going to be developed. I think the neighbors would like to be a part of thinking through that. Before it changed hands, there were a lot of conversations, I think, that led to the design that was approved. And I think this just sold in May. And as far as I know, those conversations haven't happened yet. So in this form, I would just ask that it, I don't know what the request is, but I suppose some type of deferral, which may be the prerogative of the applicant. I would say to the one recommendation about heights, there was some pushback from the applicant about conforming to the adjacent building. What used to be Pizza Royale, I'm not sure what it is now, but I would definitely encourage a limitation of the height. And if the staff recommendation is to conform to the heights across the street on Forest, then I would support that recommendation as opposed to conforming to the adjacent building. That's it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Anyone else? No, applicant, we have another public.
My name is Tricia Brantley, and I'm a property owner at 1008 Forest Avenue, right next to the 5 Spot. And I also own property in the area, so I understand that people who own property get to do what they want to do with it, and I understand also that the property is going to be developed. The only thing that I would ask the commission is to keep in mind how much parking would be allotted for this, and to keep in mind that parking is rarer than chicken lips in that area, and I struggle with it as a business owner because I run a business out of my property, and I struggle with it a lot. So when considering this development and when y'all are considering it, I just want y'all to keep that in mind because it's really, really been a hardship for us. So when voting on it and finalizing everything, just please keep that in mind. I just wanted to say something about that. It's really been a hardship for us. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? I'm going to give 2 seconds for anyone else.
I might just make a clarifying point about the foundation. And
yes, please.
Yeah. So that's standard language that goes into almost all of our infill recommendations. And the point for that typically is, most of our info that we look at are those single family or duplex houses that are going kind of in the middle of a street. They're, filling in a vacant lot. And so in those cases, what we're looking at is the height of that foundation matching the heights of the foundation on either side to a reasonable extent given the grade. Because you don't want a foundation that's 6 feet tall where the houses next door have foundations that are 2 feet tall. For a site like this is a more unusual site, we will be just looking at kind of making sure that the height is where it should be per grade, because there is a lot of grade here, and I think Pizza Royale sets up fairly tall, and there is looks like they're kind of cutting into the grade that's existing on the lot. So what we'll be looking at, it's flat, just making sure that kind of where those entries are and where that first floor level is at a reasonable level given the grade and given the context. So this will be different kind of than our typical infill and what we're typically looking for. So just wanted to clarify that point because that was just kind of standard language that went into the commission to the report,
right?
Which maybe applies differently here than it does in other cases.
Commissioners, are you pretty clear on that?
And usually that's done with an inspection. So they call us out. They're supposed to call us out for a foundation inspection, and we go out and we take a look to see where that foundation is.
Yeah, interesting how you were going to do that when it's not normal that we see this kind of project. Okay. Yes, the applicant is back.
Yeah, I want to touch on a couple points that was brought up. One, just talking about the letter from the Lockland Springs Neighborhood Association. I read through their letter, and a lot of their discussion points were based on, height, form, setbacks, and everything we're doing here is very much similar to the previously approved plan. So we wouldn't want to change anything on that aspect. This is a constrained site. The right-of-ways are constrained. So when you look at the major collector street plan, we're not necessarily doing exactly that. We are providing, a 4-foot planting strip, 5-foot sidewalk, which was approved in the last plan. So that is an improvement when it comes to the existing sidewalks, giving a little bit more space to the street. I know there are trees on the site, so we are planning on providing street trees all the way along the property to kind of maintain that same greenery. And as you can see in the rendering, we're very open to doing a lot of planters on these terraces to kind of help do some green aspects to the property. And similarly with the garage area to the right. When it comes to the form that we talked about, the previous design actually had it extending all the way to the alley. So it was actually a larger form than what we're showing now. It had 7 townhomes at the time. And now we're showing 6 townhomes and trying to step it down to kind of alleviate that higher and bigger mass when you lead into the residential. And then the last point I wanted to make was we did have, the original design did have retail. When we looked at it more in a constructability and size, it really wasn't feasible. When it comes to the parking that we were talking about here, obviously retail requires a lot of parking. There's no parking here. We're trying to put this garage just to serve the residents, so we're providing 100% parking on our site and not introducing a retail component that has nowhere to park. So kind of the reasons why we did it that way.
Thank you for that clarification. Hopefully the neighborhood will hear that. Okay, I think I haven't closed public hearing yet, right, Commissioner? Have I? Okay. Is there anyone else that wants to speak? Okay, we're closing public hearing. Okay. Commissioners? I think I do have one question for the applicant. Have you discussed this with Councilmember Withers?
Yes.
There was engagement with the council person and the neighborhood?
Yes, we did meet with Councilman Withers on site to talk about it. And we did, the first steps we took was to meet with Historic just to understand exactly what needed to be done to maintain the same approval. We're here today just to get an approval and continue on with the construction. We're not trying to change anything different than what was previously approved.
Right, and you might further talk to the council member, and I think I did not get the impression that there was further discussion with the council member. I did not get that. So, because he was expressing that there was, the history of it and all of that. Council member.
If I may, just I did meet with the team initially and advise them to work with staff, which they have. The neighborhood association themselves, the neighborhood association as a board did not, to my knowledge, review the proposal until the staff reports were published. And with all the activities of the last weekend, I know they were able to get a letter out kind of yesterday, but it's like I said, with the prior plan, there was a little bit more engagement on the front end with the neighborhood association, and certainly this team is basing off of that, I guess I would say. But in reviewing the letter from the neighborhood association, I'm trying to articulate what are maybe some things that are different between this plan and that one, which is why the neighborhood association would have supported the prior plan, and they have some concerns remaining about this one. That's all. So
Just wanted to make sure I heard that clearly. Okay, commissioners?
I'll go first, since I'm resident of Laughlin Springs. This is my neighborhood. I'm very familiar with the parcel and the issues at play here. From my perspective, I think that this is a obvious continuation of what we already approved quite a while ago, in 2021. In some ways, it's better in terms of providing the parking in the rear structure and alleviating the additional parking, which parking is not really under our we don't really give that consideration under the guidelines that we are in charge of. But just to say that, to sort of alleviate some of the concerns that have been raised through public comment. I think the staff recommendation has provided for some good conditions that will improve the project in terms of entrances and their locations and how they address the street. So as much as I also will miss having a green space on this corner, it is going to be developed, and we do need housing in Nashville in general. So it meets all of the base zoning and community plans that have been worked on by the neighborhood for years and years that Councilman Withers detailed. It meets our design guidelines, and so I will support the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments?
Yeah, I'm compelled by the applicant's approach to the design and some of the comments made here, and additionally to Commissioner Price's comments that, we approved this before, and it, while there was some maybe possibly more engagement or a feeling of more engagement with the community, the fact is that it's less massive. It's the same use and it's no taller, and I would struggle to force an applicant to retrade a project that previously had met with, under our review, had met with the guidelines. So I like Commissioner Price and swayed by that fact.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I can't say how much I appreciate Councilman Withers giving us the background on this. It really does help to give us context and information that I, for one, didn't know, and so that helps out a lot. I agree with the other commissioners' comments. There were other objections raised by the Neighborhood Association and participants here, including parking, including stormwater, including, tree canopy, and I think that although those are significant concerns, they're not part of the purview of what historic does, and so they're really outside our jurisdiction to review those things. So, but there are other bodies in Metro that will be looking at all that. So with that, unless there are other comments, with respect to North 11th Street and Forest Avenue, I move for approval with all staff conditions.
Vice Chair has made a motion. Second by Commissioner Price. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes. Thank you, applicant.
Okay, next up we have 107 4th Avenue North. This is an application for the construction of new infill on this surface parking lot. The proposed infill will be 5 stories tall with a height of 65 feet. There will be a partial 6th floor that reaches a maximum height of 80 feet. This level will be stepped back 30 feet as per the guidelines. The proposal meets the guidelines for height and massing. The design includes an appropriate street-level storefront system and ample fenestration on the upper floors. The infill meets the guidelines for setbacks, rhythm of openings, roof shape, and orientation. Final review of materials is recommended, including brick and stone samples, the storefront bulkhead material, and all doors and windows. Here's just some context photographs. There at the bottom is the back of the Ryman Auditorium, which is immediately to the right of this site. And then there on the left, that building is immediately to the left. That's the 4th Avenue elevation of 400 Broad. Then here you see Broadway, and the yellow arrow kind of points to where this building will tuck in there on 4th. And then on the bottom, that is directly across the street. So in conclusion, staff recommends approval of the proposed infill with the following conditions twice. Sorry about that. Materials shall be reviewed and approved prior to purchase and installation. Glazing shall be clear, and signage and lighting must be reviewed and approved and shall be submitted separately. With these conditions, staff finds that the infill meets Section 3 for new construction and the Broadway Historic Preservation Zoning Overlay. I know the applicant is here. I don't know if they want to speak or if they're happy. If you have questions for me or you have questions for them, they're available.
Any questions for Jenny? Okay. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is John Barnett. I'm with Barnett Design Studio. We're at 416 Main Street. I just wanted to say that I've enjoyed working with staff for the last several weeks to arrive at the design that is before you all today, and I'm just here to answer any questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Open public hearing? Close public hearing? Commissioners?
I think this is a great project on a surface parking lot downtown, and we're adding a new building where there was none before, and so it's good for the city, and it's a good design. I used to park here and go shop at Gruen's Guitars, which was right next to it back in the day. It's been a while. So, yeah, I approve of the applicant and the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Commissioner.
So unless there's other discussion with respect to 107 4th Avenue North, I move for approval with staff recommendations and conditions.
Vice Chair has made a motion.
Second.
Commissioner Price has made a second. All in favor? Okay. I don't see anyone opposed, so we are going to pass that. So thank you very much. Thank you, applicant.
Thank you.
All right, this one might be more complicated. Okay. Next up is 622 Jefferson Street. This is also an application for construction of infill on a vacant lot. This one is located on the corner of Jefferson Street and 7th Avenue in the Germantown Historic Preservation Overlay. The Germantown Overlay is divided into 5 different development zones. Each zone has its own guidelines for appropriate infill. This parcel is in the National Register zone as seen here. The zone corresponds with the boundaries of the Germantown National Register District and allows for new construction to be up to 2 stories tall, a height that was determined to be appropriate to the context in this oldest section of the neighborhood. This section of Jefferson Street is part of the federally recognized National Register District and the local National Register Zone because of the 2 historic resources located here, the Oddfellows Hall and the Elliott School. The Oddfellows Hall, there on the left, was destroyed by a tornado in 2020. The applicant argues that as the Oddfellows Hall building is no longer standing, it is now appropriate to design according to the Jefferson Street Development Zone, which allows up to 5 stories. There's been considerable neighborhood discussion over the appropriateness of this approach, and you've received letters from neighbors who both support and oppose this direction. Staff found that it could be appropriate to follow the National Register Zone guidelines. These guidelines allow for a 4-story building up to 45 feet tall with a stepped-back 5th story. The applicant's proposing a 5-story structure with both the 4th and 5th stories stepped back. This helps keep the main massing roughly equivalent to the height of the historic Elliott School. However, the height of the 3 floors is about 41 feet 4 inches, just a few feet less than the guidelines allow for 4 floors. And then the applicant proposes 2 additional floors above stepped back. Staff finds the total height of approximately 64 feet should be reduced to be no more than 60 feet. Additionally, the floor heights and window proportions of the upper floors should be reduced to be less than the floors below as per the guidelines. Staff finds that the proposed setbacks along Jefferson are appropriate, but that the setbacks along 7th Avenue North need to match the building behind it at 7th and Madison to appropriately address the historic context further down the block. The guidelines call for all structures to be 80% brick, which this proposal is not. This development uses 3 types of exterior cladding, all of which are masonry products. The primary material is a terracotta rain screen product, which is proposed for use in several locations. It will be both white and green and smooth and textured. Limestone is also used in many locations throughout the project. Staff finds that while the project is not 80% brick, these alternative materials could be appropriate here as they are all masonry. All materials should be reviewed and approved prior to purchase and installation. On the 4th floor, open-air terraces are provided for the penthouse units. These will be on top of the 3rd floor roof, occupying the step-back area in front of the pushback 4th floor massing. The guidelines state that rooftop decks are not appropriate in the National Register Zone. Staff finds they could be appropriate here, facing Jefferson Street, but that they should meet all the requirements for rooftop decks. One such requirement is that rooftop decks shall be set back 8 feet from the front wall of the building, while these decks are proposed right up to that front wall. Staff finds the decks should follow the guidelines and should be at least 8 feet stepped back from the front wall. The decks could still extend to the edge on the sides of the building. In conclusion, staff recommends approval of the project with the following conditions. 1, the setback along 7th Avenue North shall match the building at the corner of 7th and Madison. 2, the overall height shall be reduced to be no more than 60 feet from grade as measured from Jefferson Street. 3, the floor heights and window proportions on the 4th and 5th floors shall be reduced to be less than that of the floors below, creating more traditional proportions. 4, staff shall review and approve all materials as seen there. 5, the rooftop deck shall step back 8 feet from the front wall. 6, any new sidewalks shall be brick and in the dominant pattern closest to the development. That's standard for Germantown. 7, exterior lighting shall be reviewed and approved by staff prior to purchase and installation. And 8, staff shall approve the final mechanical and utility locations. With these conditions, staff finds the proposed infill and there's no outbuilding. The proposed infill meets the Germantown Historic Preservation Overlay Design Guidelines. And in the interest of time, I kind of condensed my presentation. Didn't discuss all aspects of this project. They are all addressed in your report, but happy to answer questions if you do have any. I know the applicant is here, and I believe there's some public here as well. Do you have questions for me at this time?
Thanks, Jenny.
Okay.
Be prepared.
Good evening. Manuel Zeitlin, architect, 516 Hagen Street. And I've got with me Nellie Blevins in our office, who designed the project. She also designed the renovation of the Elliott School building and the Elliott townhouses on Madison Street across from the school, and is working on this project as well. And then James Lennon, our client with Mainland Group, and I just mentioned them in case you have questions for them later on. Anyways, can you go back to the 3D view, whoever's driving? Oh, cool. Yeah. So this was a really exciting project for us, and we've done a lot of historic projects and have come before you many times. And it's an unusual situation because there was the Oddfellows Hall, which we all loved, and our client actually had tried to buy that building and site and had us do studies for townhouses next to the Oddfellows in the scale of that building years ago, and couldn't buy it at the time. Unfortunately, it got wiped out, as you know, in the tornado. So all of a sudden, we have a site that was limited to 2 stories because of that specific building that's no longer there. So it's unusual too because there's 2 street frontages. Madison Street is scaled towards the Elliott School and the new townhouses across from it, and then Jefferson Street is the terminus of the Bicentennial Mall. There are 4 and 5 story buildings all along Jefferson Street. It's the main connector now over to East Nashville and the East Bank project that's moving forward. So as an architect, having to sort of balance those 2 sets of scales and context was a real challenge. And if you look at the rendering, the design is that it's bookended on both ends. The building on the left, it's hard to see in the drawing in the image, but we picked up real specific details from the Oddfellows Hall and replicated those in the brick portion on the left, the arch, the panels of brick going up 7th Avenue. And then on the right-hand side, we related it to the Elliott School. But in the middle, we wanted to do a more modern piece that relates to the scale of the State Archive building across the street and the more public buildings that you see coming down the mall. So it's like, how do you blend these different styles, these different scales, all in one project? And so the idea then was almost to have 2 separate buildings that address 2 different sets of needs. One is a townhouse scale street that feels very much like a street in Boston or New York, the kind of street you love to go to explore when you're in older cities and parts of Germantown. And then the new building that's a bigger scale that fits, that sort of fills in what would have been a missing tooth along Jefferson if it had stayed at 2 stories once Oddfellows was gone. I kind of nerd out a little bit, but let's see, can I go that way? Materials, the bottom right-hand corner is actually a limestone cornice detail from the Oddfellows Hall, and Nellie's worked with a terracotta manufacturer to basically take that shape and extrude it to become the pattern that's in the top right image of the terracotta rain screen, and we're going to run that vertically. So there's subtle references back to that original building. So anyway, we're very much in agreement with the staff findings. There are a couple minor things we wanted to see if we could work out with you. One was the item about the setbacks. We agreed with their comments about that and developed a solution we wanted to propose because it's 2 different sets of grids. It's the rectangular grid along Jefferson Street, and there we were using the original location of the Oddfellows Hall, which came all the way up to the corner of 7th and Jefferson. It hugged the sidewalk, if you remember. So we're asking on the townhouses facing Madison, we've actually pulled that in as requested to match the alignment of the townhouses and the angle of the townhouses across Madison Street. But then as the block straightens out, we wanted to sort of scooch back over to get closer to the sidewalk. So I think we're 3 feet off 3 feet past that alignment once the building straight's out on the townhouses, and then we come all the way to the corner, we're about 7 feet past it. And then the other two items were the comment about the roof terraces. In both cases, I think the reason that's in the ordinance for Germantown is because you want to avoid overlooking people's houses. Whereas in this case, it's kind of a celebratory boulevard, and so the idea that people, being on Jefferson Street, being across from it in the public buildings and seeing people up on their roofs at the edge actually creates some urban vitality. I mean, we're okay pushing it back 8 feet, but we think it's a better solution if we came all the way out to the edge of the building in those two cases. And then the other piece is the comment about the windows, the heights of the windows. So in the two brick portions, you'll look, we follow the guidelines exactly on those brick pieces, but with a taller first floor, and then we reduce the scale as we go up. But our thought on the other portions where the terracotta is, that's more of a background to those historically referencing brick pieces. So we wanted that to read more as almost like a solid background panel. So the height on the top floor is the height of those windows. It's really the fourth and fifth floor that are in question. They're the same height as the terracotta panels. So it's like a solid piece, a void piece, a solid piece. So it's more of a backdrop, whereas the scale that's called for in the guidelines is really more about the scale of historic buildings. So we wanted that scale to happen down at the street level. So I think that's mainly everything. I know you've got letters of support in your packets from a lot of the members of the Historic Germantown Neighbors Association. We began the process before we even started designing by meeting with them, talking about ideas, getting their input. We had a meeting with them in February where we showed the first version of this concept and got input from them, and they were very supportive. And I think a lot of the letters from that group are supportive. We're also aware that neighbors that have since bought in the townhouses we designed on the other side of Medicine had expectations of this being a lower building, which, given the fact that the Oddfellows Hall was there, that was understandable. But I think now are upset because they're losing the views from their roof terraces, which the guidelines no longer allow anyway. And our feeling is that we're trying to do a building that's a real citizen building in terms of giving something back to the street, and that for those neighbors that you're going to hear from in a minute, we feel like we've created a really great townhouse scale street, a great urban street to live on and walk on and be in your front yard and your stoops. And we're sorry that we're losing their views from their rooftop terrace, but to maintain their views and then give up an important scale building along an important boulevard, I think it's a trade-off that we hope you'll support. So, does anybody have questions before I...
Could you tell me about your request about the 7th Avenue side of the setback, your proposal? I know staff is requesting same as building behind it, but if you give me a little clarification on that.
Sure. So you can see as it's submitted in this drawing, and the way we designed it, and actually it was our client's input, was the idea of having the buildings angled to parallel those buildings on Madison and then straighten out to relate to the Jefferson grid. So in this version, we're closer to the sidewalk, to the curb, to the sidewalk than the buildings across Madison. And what we did in the drawing we sent back to staff, it was too late for them to be able to review it before coming for the commission, so they had to keep that objection in there. But we pulled the angled piece totally back in alignment with the buildings across 7th. You can see where that red line is. But then as you come down, we're basically straightening it out a little bit instead of staying parallel to 7th at that point. So and then as you get to the next building, the bigger building, we're about 8 feet, I think, or so back from the sidewalk at that kind of alley corner. But as you come up to the corner of Jefferson, we're right at the intersection again, because that historic building was at that location. Did that clarify?
Yes, okay. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Manuel. Any of your other team members want to, you want to reserve rebuttal, okay. Open public hearing.
Hi all. My name is Elliot Brewer. I live in the Elliott School at 601 Madison Street, Unit 106. And I would like to come to support this development with the recommendations of staff, though also to voice a couple concerns. The three reasons I'd like to support this development is that the development is a high-quality development from Mainland, who has had multiple high-quality developments in Germantown in the past. So speaking with people who have lived in Germantown for a lot longer than I, and I go to the Germantown neighborhood meetings regularly, Mainland is one of the developers that builds the highest quality buildings in the neighborhood. And so we sort of trust them to do that, and living in a development that Mainland has designed, or has contracted with Manuel Zeitlin to help design, I can testify to its quality. We have issues with Mainland on things like warranties and things, sort of finishing things, but I think those are separate from what's applicable to this hearing. And then I think I buy the argument that it fits the urban landscape. I think there was a lot of thought given to how to fit the landscape on Madison that's more of a neighborhood row home feel, and that those row homes in the back do that very well. And then I buy the argument that we need to fit the streetscape on Jefferson, and that is a little bit more grandiose, and that does have a pretty strong facade, especially with kind of other developments that are coming in, such as the grocery store down the street, and the Elliott School and a couple of other developments. So I think the height of around 60 feet fits about average between the street landscape on Jefferson to the east. And then my final point is I kind of see this as better than alternatives, or better than some of the alternatives. I think maybe an ideal for a lot of people who may come to speak here would be if one story was chopped off of this and it was still kind of Elliott School height or around there, maybe a little bit taller and kind of really fit the neighborhood. But I do think that the rest of the alternatives may be worse and lower quality, and I'd prefer it not sit as a vacant lot for any longer.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Please come forward. And, with our timing, just if you're going to speak, please sit on the front row there and we can just move along.
Okay. Good afternoon, almost evening. My name is Claudia Bonneman. I'm a resident of the Elliott School building in historic Germantown at 601 Market Street. The Elliott School is the only building with historical and architectural value still standing on the north side of Jefferson Street, east of Rosa Parks. I oppose Mainland's permit application for a 5-story building for several reasons. One, there's no good reason to allow a 5-story building next to the 3-story Elliott School. The guidelines for the different zones were developed jointly by the residents and the commission. The National Register Zone guidelines recognize and preserve the historical and architectural value of the Elliott School building and should not be disregarded merely because we lost a wonderful building next door. In this location, that is at 622 Jefferson Street, small is beautiful. The commission should realize that the iconic view of Germantown from the Capitol building consists of only the block on Jefferson between 6th and 7th. You can't see anything else. The proposed 5-story building will overwhelm the 3-story anchor Elliott School building and diminish the school's building's historical and architectural value, in fact, and as seen from the Capitol building. A 5-story building next to the 3-story Elliott School will block our ability to see the Jubilee Hall spire at Fisk University. Jubilee Hall has endless value, and it is beautiful. A view of the spire can be enjoyed from 622 Jefferson and from the Elliott School, so long as the 5-story building is disallowed. So respectfully, I ask that Mainland's application be denied insofar as it seeks to build a 4th and 5th floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bonneman.
My name is Frida Maloney. I own a unit in the Elliott School. If you look at the 3D model, I own the unit that, I guess, the celebratory rooftop that he described would be overlooking. We bought in this building because the hall had already been demolished because we were told that these were the last rooftops that could be built in historic Germantown. So no, I oppose any variances for this project.
Thank you for the comment. Anyone else? We have received quite a few others in the public comment share file, so duly noted on that. Otherwise, I will close public hearing, or if the applicant wants their minute to rebuttal. Okay, you're good. All right, I will close public hearing. Commissioners.
May I ask staff or legal? I understand this parcel or is a part of design guideline National Register District. So it is based on the no longer have the Oddfellows building was formerly located prior to the tornado damage. Do we have any policy or in that effect if the building is no longer intact, the procedure, or do we determine case by case, location by location? Is there any guideline on that?
There's no guideline or policy for that now.
So let me ask you another way. So in that case, we know there was so many surrounding community was engaged, such as historic Germantown neighborhood. And as far as from the public comment, at least twice there was community meeting was held on that project in the beginning and in the process prior to come to our body. So if that kind of public engagement to modify designing guideline or district, is our body have authority to interpret the new guideline after the fact of the building was no longer is there?
We didn't look at it as changing the design guidelines, but you obviously have the ability to interpret the guidelines. That's what you do for every case, every month. We were compelled by the applicant's argument. You may not be, but that is completely up to you whether or not you feel there's an argument to be made that this is different than other lots in the neighborhood, other lots on Jefferson. Yeah, that's completely up to you.
Thank you. The reason I asked is, where I'm coming from is, yes, it's so sad to lose historic buildings such as Oddfellows building, so beautiful. I believe because of such a historical, beautiful building, the district, Jefferson Street district, and Rosa Parks Development Zone and National Register Development Zone. So those, different development zone criteria was created back then. But now, unfortunately, we do not have that building, and surrounding the area of the Jefferson, I wonder if staff have like a sky view of the comparison of all the Jefferson Street skyline. Can you put up that from the staff report?
We don't have the entire staff report in the presentation. That's actually 7th.
Yeah, I think, applicant provided a comparison from Rosa Park Street to all the way towards, 4th Avenue. So after looking at those skyline and looking at Jefferson Street, I am compelled to determine that section of the corner of Jefferson and 7th is probably, it would be more appropriate if we interpret as a part of Jefferson Street development zone rather than prior National Register Development Zone. The reason is because we do have already developed new infill at the corner of Madison and 7th already. So that is three-story high. And, if we were to follow National Register Development Zone, so that building will be only allowed 2-story. So looking at entire Jefferson Street, having placing two-story building in that corner does not meet intent and purpose of overall design guideline. That's I feel the interpretation of the design guideline coming to, up to 5-story. And I think because of that next door, Rosa Park Development Zone is up to 60 feet. So directly across from that development zone, I believe 60 feet maximum will be reasonable request. And I think this particular design is very respectable of the surrounding historical structure of the material and design, and difference a color theme from that area. So I think all the design aspect and everything, this proposal is probably not people would like, especially if you're living exactly directly behind it, because it will lose the view. But overall, context of this puzzle, I think it is a very thoughtful design and meets, if we interpret as Jefferson Street development guideline, I think it meets all the intent and guideline. But as far as height, I agree with the staff recommendation. It should not go over 60 feet, so 60 feet will be appropriate. And as far as roof deck, I understand the applicant wants to push towards front, but I think we do have a standard from 8 feet from the front of the building. So I think it should keep those standard. So as far as a setback, I understand staff is recommending exactly same as the building behind it. But I think since it's transition from Jefferson Street to behind and traditional National Register development, I think somewhere in between, not strictly meet with the development behind it on the Madison Street, kind of in between, a little bit more lenience will be appropriate in this corner. So that's my thinking for now.
Thank you, Commissioner.
So I did drive by and look at all this, and it's a long time since the building that was demolished by the tornado and Geist were sort of the most visible buildings on Jefferson Street. It's, the dramatic change over the last couple of decades has been phenomenal. And I agree with Commissioner Johnson about the appropriateness of this being in the Jefferson Street zone versus the other. I do think the proposal by the applicant was sensitive to the existing neighbors on Madison by having the houses that were in scale with the ones that are across the street facing Madison, and the higher structure along Jefferson where the other higher structures are all the way down to the bridge. So I support this. I do think one of the things that we do need to do, I agree with the staff recommendations, but also think that we need to have one in there that the lower block stay at 45 feet or less, as they adjust floor heights, that the lower block not exceed 45 feet. So.
Well, I find myself in the rare position where I disagree with the staff recommendation and previous commissioners' comments, respectfully. I am not convinced. First of all, I want to say I think it's a very high-quality design. It's I don't question the quality of the materials or the design. I still am not convinced that it is appropriate in this location. I am not convinced that a natural disaster just immediately obviates the National Register zone and the boundaries and where it's located. I think that was done intentionally. And I think maybe the conflict what's going on here is that my professional work is working with the National Register criteria for evaluation every day. And it's different from neighborhood guideline overlay So we're used to looking at things through one lens, but when you look at it from a National Register lens, there's different considerations that maybe we don't always talk about. Maybe I can pull it together enough to sort of describe where that tension's coming in. I think we should stick with, because I don't think a natural disaster just immediately means that we should throw everything out for this block of Jefferson. I think people moved into the Germantown district because of the historic neighborhood scale of the buildings, 1- and 2-story historic homes, and that this proposal will further erode the scale or the integrity of the district as it is historically. And I think we're narrowing down, we're looking at what's just going to go on this block, this parcel, when really we need to also consider what the effect that this development would have on the larger district's integrity. And I think that it's going to further erode that integrity rather than bring it closer into compliance with what the zone was originally intended to do. So I just would encourage other commissioners to take a more holistic view of what the what's remaining of the entire Germantown Historic District versus just what's visible along Jefferson Street. I find myself compelled by public comments that this is a gateway into the Germantown historic neighborhood and should be preserved. That gateway feel should be preserved in terms of allowable height and what the neighborhood and the commission came together and originally wrote the boundaries of which development zone was where. So I'm also persuaded by the neighbors who live in Elliott School who bought their, and others throughout the neighborhood, with the understanding that the National Register zone guidelines would be followed for future development. And again, the tornado was a tragic event, but I just don't understand why that means all bets are off, and that 5 stories where there was 2 is all of a sudden allowable. So I'm not in. I don't support the staff recommendation or the way this conversation's going so far. So that's it.
I appreciate your comments. I understand you're in the weeds with all this, and that's good. I must say that I'm compelled by reading the public comment of a past president of Historic Germantown and the current treasurer, all voting in support of this project, and so I just want to say I respect your opinion quite a bit, and but I'm leaning toward the historic, the people in historic Germantown, and I think that Manuel has been kind of sensitive to their view by lowering the height of that one space in front of Madison, and so that's my comment.
I'm going to dive way down in the weeds for staff, just for clarification of when we're talking about height and what the recommendation is and where that would be measured from. And sort of what the current proposal is. It appears that the current building is in the 65-ish from grade. Does that sound right to those who analyzed the project?
I believe the proposal was about 64 or something, so just under 65,
And
the
so
top of the 5th floor.
We're talking about 4 feet, and I always get sideways when it comes to measuring. Are we measuring the top of parapet or top of roof plate? I know that we tried to address that maybe at one time, or at least I remember discussions in the neighborhood guidelines of how to do that, and then that may vary from how Metro Codes does it and so on and so forth.
Sure, and honestly, in the field, it can get dicey, obviously.
Sure.
But ideally, we are measuring in elevation from grade to the top of the parapet.
Okay. And so I was just looking at some of the applicants' sections and just trying to determine, taking 5 feet out of a building like this is possible, but sometimes you sort of cross a threshold where if you're trying to sell at a certain price point and you get 8.5-foot floors, and to maintain those number of stories, are we in danger of talking about or sacrificing a level? I just want to make sure I understand that. And I don't think we're at that place, but I did want to have just some personal clarity on where we were. And Commissioner Price, I appreciate your comments, because in just looking at this on the surface, it's certainly a drastic change from were a tornado not to come through, and we still had a historic asset there. And I don't know that this is right, but I think I'm going to maybe harken back to when the guidelines were put in place and sort of the factors that were taken into account. Germantown was early on identified as a place for preservation overlay, and that didn't happen. And then much later, it did happen. And some of the factors that have shaped the neighborhood in the very recent past significantly were already afoot whenever that was taken into account, and whenever these guidelines were written. And a lot of times, we all feel like we're special in one way or the other. And so Germantown certainly felt like, when we were putting these together, in order to make them happen, that we did need to take more of a commercial approach, or take more into account larger multifamily developments at the edges, and that was accommodated and or written into the neighborhood. And I think for those long-time residents who no longer live here, some who moved away maybe because of that, or for whatever reason, everybody's going to have an opinion of now what the built environment looks like over there. But I think it was certainly, there was some compromise that took place, and it was not, it moved far away from a one-size-fits-all. Certainly our guidelines aren't one-size-fits-all, but melding that commercial and residential component is a difficult thing to do. And while I personally am torn by that, I don't see this one tooth missing. It's almost as if the gate's already open, and now because this is missing, I respect the opinion. You see it the other way. Well, for that reason, maybe it should be. You should hold the line. I agree with your assessment that it's well designed and it's fitting. But I tend to lean more towards that compromise, and maybe I'm clouded by the fact that I was in that compromise when it happened. But seeing some of the public support, albeit similar opposition, that's kind of perspective that I bring. I don't know that's terribly enlightening, but certainly it's feelings I have about the project and the location.
So as part of this, would it be possible to pull up the map of the historic district from the guidelines? Would you search for that and pull it up?
So
I'll just clarify. So the map on the right is the federally recognized National Register Historic District. That's what you're seeing on the right there. I put that there so you can see how it corresponds with the National Register zone. We didn't just make up those boundaries. They're actually the National Register district boundaries. So there on the left, that is the Germantown local historic preservation zoning overlay showing its different zones.
So I guess my point on this is, if you look at the bottom of the map on the right, that's the site that we're looking at. On the right-hand side, that black box is a school, and 7th Avenue comes down. I'm not sure what was on the site where that's labeled as 125, but it's now part of a corner parking lot. And so I think that you can see the area below Madison was actually put in because of these 3 structures, 2 of which are now gone. I think the other one is stable and not in jeopardy, hopefully from tornadoes, but that was part of the reason that I had for agreeing with the staff recommendation. I guess one of the questions I have for Commissioner Price and for the staff is, as this is a National Register district, does it require more than our action to modify the boundaries of that district?
It does not. Listing in the National Register is honorary. It doesn't change property rights in any way.
Well, but I will say, though, that the boundary will remain the same. We'll have one more non-contributing property than we have now. So it's moving it further away from being a historic district than closer.
My last question on that note, the National Registry Development Zone is, started behind that particular property, corner of Jefferson and 7th. Also, Madison and 7th and after is National Register Development Zone. So if that's the case, I mean, it is the case. And how come the new development, corner of Madison and 7th, 3-story was approved? Because that's clearly new building built recently. But if, indeed, this is also a National Register Development Zone, but guideline states up to 1 or 2-story. But this building itself is 3-story.
And forgive me, I don't remember the exact timing, but I'm pretty sure everything else that's on Jefferson now was before the guidelines changed.
No, I'm asking the Madison and 7th, the building behind this proposal.
And I don't remember the details about it, but that is what you approved.
I remember.
Thanks. Do you want him to come back up?
Yeah, please do.
Hi, I'm James Lennon with Mainland Companies. We're the applicant for this, and we were the developer for those townhomes that you're inquiring about and the Elliott School. We purchased that property in 2014, the Elliott School property. We put an SP in place for the north lots, and that SP called for 35 units. That's what set the height at 45 feet. It came back before the commission 2014, 2015, I don't know. But then the design guide, and at that time, it was consistent with National Register guidelines. The National Register District guidelines changed in 2017. Those buildings were built subsequent to 2017, but consistent with approvals that were established in 2015. So,
Thank you for that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Such good discussion.
So with all due respect for conversation and judgment, I will go ahead and offer a motion that with respect to 622 Jefferson Street, that we approve the application with all staff conditions, plus the condition that the lower block of the building not exceed 45 feet.
Vice Chair has made a motion with an addition.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
May I modify the condition 1? Because condition 1 was to make the setback same as 7th Avenue, but applicant was kind of somewhere in between, so maybe not strictly 7th Avenue, but have a little bit room to modify in between the existing building behind the Madison Avenue and current proposed setback, so staff and applicant can determine appropriate setback, not exactly same as the Madison building.
Which they would measure with the staff as well. So, Vice Chair, would you like to?
Absolutely. So I think that's a good catch, Commissioner Johnson. So I'd modify the motion to say that with respect to condition 1, that the applicant will resubmit to staff, and staff will have discretion to determine the appropriate setback along 7th Avenue.
Vice Chair, may I also ask, when you say the lower block, I assume this is what you mean, but I just want to be absolutely sure. You mean the first 3 levels?
The first 3 levels.
Thank you.
Yes, that's right.
Second. Okay. There was a motion. There's a second. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? We have 1 opposed. And 4 passes the motion. Okay. I think we're good with that. All right, thank you. Thank you, staff. Thank you, Malin.
This proposal includes rooftop, side, and rear additions. The side addition will be located within an existing alley, and portions of that space will be used by the Metro Police Department. Overall, the project meets the design guidelines, and most of staff's recommendations are the typical ones that you see, but I'd like to point out several that are specific to this project. We recommend, rather than having a railing on the top of the side addition, that a parapet wall is used instead. Historically, the buildings didn't have railings on top, so having a small portion that appears to be a little taller than the rest of the building will be similar to the taller portion on the far left that exists today. Staff recommends that the third level balcony be pushed back to be beyond where the third level window turns the corner, where you see that material change on that right photo. And we ask for that in order to maintain this historic feature and to minimize the visual impact of two balconies, since the historic buildings don't have balconies. We recommend that the fifth level windows of the side addition have fixed windows rather than a fold-up type. Once open, they create an awning, and the interior railing will be highly visible. The awning won't be associated with a deck, and you don't see that type of window configuration historically. The applicant is here, and they can provide you with more detail about how the project originated and their design proposal. But in the meantime, did you have any questions for me? Thank you.
Thank you. Robin?
Hi, my name is Tracy Ford. I'm a principal with EOA Architects. We're at 515 Main Street. This has been a really fun project to work on, and in an effort to keep it brief, I'm just going to say that we are very comfortable with all the staff recommendations, except for we'd like to discuss one with the commission, and that being the windows of the fifth floor, and this slide is pretty appropriate to have that conversation. Our client is really excited about this infill addition and would really like to have windows on that floor that open. What we'd like to propose is to work with staff to look at different configurations. Right now, we're proposing the awning type windows. Part of that is so that we can have windows side by side and not have them interfere, and we're certainly opening to changing the sill height so that you won't see the rail. So as opposed to changing it to fixed windows, we'd really like to discuss the option to have operable windows on the fifth floor, just like we're doing on the fourth floor additions on the 411 building and the fourth floor addition at the Enfield. The other thing I'd like to talk about is there was a letter that was sent by a neighbor quite recently. One of the questions that they ask is about the observation balcony on the second floor related to the Metro Police. We have been working very closely with Metro PD and Nashville NDOT to create a special operations center. One of their requirements was to have an observation deck that overlooks Broadway, and we spent quite a bit of time working with Robin to make sure that it made sense on that second floor. The reason why it's on the second floor is obviously so they can overlook Broadway, but also so that they can have a quick way to get down to the street. So that's one of the big reasons why that happened. We have a great team putting this together. We know that the alley infill is going to be a complex, very nuanced building between two historic structures. We're working with R.C. Matthews, Terry Scholes at ENT Structural Engineers. We know that there's nuances with putting that together, and we're well armed to do that. We've already had conversations with Public Works, NES, and a lot of balls are rolling in that court. So I think that's quick, which is I think what we're all looking for. So thanks.
Thanks, Tracy. We might ask you more questions, but open public hearing.
Good evening. Grover Collins with Collins Legal. I'm also on behalf of the ownership group at 417 Broadway. We're right next door at Ernest Hub. So we're kind of new to this, so I'll be brief. But I will say that as far as 1 through 4 of the staff recommendations, we would agree with those, but we do take issue with 5 and 6. Most importantly, if you look at the balcony that's going to be on the second floor, we're new to this, so we haven't been in part of the communications with police on what's going to happen with that. Obviously, that alley is going to be taken from us as well, so it's one of those things where we would like to be more involved in that conversation. As far as, I think Robin did a good job in the recommendations. If you look on pages 5, 6, and 7 of what she has put in the packet, what we're also concerned with is if you look at these balconies, number one, they're not historically allowed on Broadway, as all of you know, but what we're also concerned about is the Ernest Tubb sign, which is going to be there forever. This is a building that's been there since 1850. It's the longest running Midnight Jamboree, longest show on WSM, which will continue. We're really worried about that sight line and how that's going to block that sign from that side of the road. And there's no need for the third level observation deck. That's something that hasn't been identified as something that the police would need. And that's not something that would be in the plan. As far as that, we are concerned there will be some issues that will be brought up by the structural. We have our architect here as well. But we are concerned about building so close to us, what that's going to do, and if that's going to deteriorate from our storefront, because you're basically covering up our store, even though they're backing off that first floor. When you have that second alley, you're really taking away from our storefront and then taking away from that visibility of the sign. Where in normal new construction, you wouldn't have a new sign within 25 feet, and that's going to be right there next to us. So that's something that we're super concerned about. And I know that a deferment's not on the table here today, but it is something where we anticipate being highly involved and having more of a conversation, because we're just brand new to this ownership. So we anticipate there being a lot more conversation between the two of us. We just would like to do that before anything gets approved and moved on. And the last thing I will say is one of the recommendations was that there be a new design that's submitted to planning and staff. While I understand that's normal course, we wouldn't be a part of that, and we wouldn't get to raise objections to that if that happened, and that's something that we're very concerned about. So we would like to see that new plan before something is approved, and then it's out of our hands and out of the public forum for us to be able to object to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there. My name is Benjamin Eagles, representing Mayor Cooper's office here today. I want to thank the commissioners, of course, for your time and consideration of this project, as well as the staff that has been really helpful throughout this process. I know it's been in the news. Wanted to speak a little bit about the plans on the Metro side for the alleyway. This is really the biggest win-win in terms of a public-private partnership, maybe in the history of downtown, certainly I would say in the history of Broadway. The Department of Transportation is going to be having a satellite traffic management center to supplement the larger county-wide center, similar to what other cities have, and it's sort of a best practice. For instance, Truist Park in Atlanta has one. So this will really help manage the traffic flow downtown, and the police, for the first time, are going to have sort of a substation, an outpost, break rooms here, entirely paid for and built out by the applicant. A note about the second floor balcony, and I just want to be especially grateful to staff for understanding the utility that provides from a safety and traffic flow standpoint to NDOT and to MNPD. It provides officers and traffic management staff with an opportunity to step out and survey the street in real time, in addition to the monitors and screens that they'll have within the facility. So that is really critical. I would say just a quick note about the third floor balcony is it does provide weather and sort of rain cover for the second floor. And I would encourage the commission, given the applicant's flexibility throughout this process, as well as the overwhelming public benefit derived from this project, to perhaps provide some flexibility with respect both to the balconies and to the request of keeping the windows open. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you. Please thank the mayor's office.
Hello, everyone. I'm Garrett Sickles, 395 McAdoo Avenue. I'm the project manager for 417 Broadway. As a general contractor, I have experience building and developing multifamily commercial projects around the country. I've seen firsthand how construction projects affect neighboring properties. We're all local here, and we're honored to have this opportunity of preserving 417. We don't want to inhibit progress on the alley or needlessly stall construction. However, the structural integrity of our building could be seriously impacted by the activities of 411 Broadway partners. Our building was built in the 1850s. It predates the Civil War. The 411 infill project will require excavating over 14,000 cubic feet of soil, which currently rests against and stabilizes our foundation. It is entirely foreseeable that excavating this material away from the foundation may impact the structural integrity of a historic building on Broadway. A forensic study of our foundation and how it may be affected by the proposed construction is necessary to proceed prudently with this project. Such a study, complete with recommendations on how to safely proceed with the alley infill while preserving the integrity of our building, could be available to this committee in 60 days. It would be rash for any decision to be made on this matter without considering waiting for this study. The iconic Ernest Tubbs building has stood up for over 170 years. 60 days is not a long wait to ensure it stands for another 170. We want to be model stewards for the city of Nashville. We ask and recommend deferring this to the next meeting to allow time for a proper forensic study for the Tubbs Foundation to be completed in the best interest of all parties and this commission. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Dale Tubb. So I'm here to voice concern. I don't want to echo what everybody else has said, but
Can we have your address, please? Can we have your address, please?
Pardon me?
Your address, please.
8129 Devons Drive. So I have concern with the excavation of the alleyway for structural reasons, obviously. A big concern of mine is my entire life growing up here in Nashville, and 71 years ago when my grandfather opened that store, they bolted that sign to the front of that building, which makes it probably the most iconic sign down on Broadway. Made it through the 70s, 80s when nobody wanted to go to Broadway, and in my mind, the line of sight when you're standing on First Avenue at Riverfront or the top of Fifth at Bridgestone, and you look down and you see that sign. The balconies, to me, create an obstruction of a viewpoint of it, and that's wholeheartedly that's my concern. We've fought really hard to get involved in this and help this process. So a deferral would be something I would ask for you guys to strongly consider.
Thank you, Mr. Tubb, and we'll let you know about that deferral after we have public comment closing. Anybody else for public comment? Okay. Does the applicant have any rebuttal time? Do you want to rebuttal?
I would like to.
If you could just yield a second or two to me, is that okay?
Sure.
Thank you. Just want to address two concerns. One, as was alluded to, the Ernest Tubb building recently changed ownership, and Metro Legal, as well as the applicant, worked closely with the previous owner, and that, in fact, is what facilitated the transaction of the alleyway that we will be taking to council soon. So recognizing that there is a new owner, but there was extensive communication and collaboration with the previous one. And with respect to the line of sight, having spent some time on Broadway and visited this site, there are a lot of signs between First and Fifth. So I would resist the notion that the balconies are in any way taking away from that very significant sign, or that they are a unique blockage to the line of sight where there are a number of other signs along other buildings between First and Fifth. Thank you.
Thank you. Did the applicant want to rebuttal? Okay. As to deferral, we're not allowed to defer as a commission. It would be the applicant to be requesting the deferral. So thank you for your request, but that is not within our legal right to do so, other than if the applicant wants to defer for further discussions. Okay, I think, Commissioner, did I open and close public hearing? I have my person over here that watches me to be sure that I have closed public hearing.
I have a question for the applicant,
So I did close public hearing.
Maybe for the mayor's office representative. Is this I know we don't review this, but this is not a small interdiction into the Broadway Historic District. And I'm curious if there's a lease or sort of what's the time frame of occupancy by, there's a public benefit here and of tourism and lots of other things that we don't need to talk about, but I'm just curious what the time frame and ownership structure is. It wouldn't necessarily influence us, but there's a permanency to this, and that's what we review is permanency, and that's the nature of my question.
Yes, sir, and it's a great question because I think the one thing that is sort of at the root of the question is wanting to make sure that a balcony that is granted an exception for a unique public use wouldn't turn around and become a private use in 5, 10, or 50 years. The arrangement between the applicant and Metro will be a long-term ground lease at no charge or perhaps $1 to Metro for the square footage for both the mini traffic management center as well as the police facility, and that's going to be on a very long-term basis with extensions. And again, the build out of that is going to be paid for by the applicant, but in no way will this become a private use, and there will not be any private access to that second floor. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioners, yes?
Yeah, I have a question to the applicant as well, either one of you. It's kind of hard for me to see, but does that balcony extend out from the facade of the building, and if so, how much?
It does extend, I believe it extends about 2.5, 3 feet. The second floor and currently the third floor balcony.
Can we pick that picture up, please?
It says 3%.
Commissioner, does this help you? That one.
Right there. So it's about 2 or 3 feet?
That's correct. And it's scalloped, so it has a little bit of a minimal impact as well. So, but I believe at the outermost right now, it's about 3 feet, I would say,
Okay.
right under.
And if I may, the second floor balcony is for police use. Third floor is for bar use.
Correct. And staff's recommendation was to pull that back.
Which you've agreed with, right?
We're open to that, but we would love for you to discuss it. I mean, it does make some sense to have it as far as shelter for the police below. So it would be great to have it that way as well.
Did you say that the third floor is for what use?
Bar use.
Bar use.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
I know this is a little bit unusual. Can I ask a question of the applicant? Recognizing that the third level balcony is for partly to cover the second level balcony, what do you think about pushing the railing back to that area where the materials change on the side, but keep a deck out to cover the one below?
I mean, I think we're open to that. I think it's an aesthetic question as well. So,
Commissioners, any other questions or discussion?
I do think one of the ways that might satisfy most of the parties would be to just have that as a covering on the third level and not a balcony itself. So if that became like the rest of it, I can see the need for the police to have the balcony, but to create another balcony there, I'm not sure that helps out. So, but it'd be, in their request to cover it, it's pretty easy to have a little canopy that comes out there that covers it. So.
Yeah, because I don't want to belabor this, but it's like you're creating another public safety hazard by having people standing there with, drinks in their hands right over the police. So it's nothing in our guidelines addresses that, but I'm just thinking out loud.
I don't disagree with any of the comments, or I guess from whence these comments come. I think probably from the applicant's standpoint and from the person toting the note on this, this is certainly a give to get scenario, and they're getting less if we flush it up. But I think that's why we're here. So I acknowledge that, but I think having it flush would make, as an intervention into the historic district, I just feel better about that, and then providing the canopy for viewing. Rain never falls straight down, so rarely does it fall straight down unless it's dripping off the canopy above, but I could be convinced certainly that a canopy there could be appropriate, and the architect certainly is capable of designing one that would fit.
So yeah, I think it's an exciting. I mean, nothing's ever boring down on Broadway when it comes before us. So this is a great project and a really unique opportunity for the city and for the applicant. I'm in support of the staff recommendation with the applicable conditions, and also with some leeway for the applicant and staff to work on this railing of the third level balcony.
Is that a motion?
Yes, and I'd like to say that is a motion.
Thank you.
I second the motion with a brief comment. This is a really exciting opportunity because it will enhance, public safety, and so deferral is out of question. We would like to, expedite the process to keep the public more safely, especially the Broadways coming back and tourists coming back. So I really appreciate applicant and public-private partnership, and long lease is really great for the metro. So with that, I second with the condition of Commissioner Price's flexibility about the third level balcony.
Robin, is that clear enough? Thank you.
I would like to say one thing, too. I know that there was public comment and comments today about structural integrity of the buildings and construction impact on the building. And I will say that's not a purview. We don't deal with means and methods of construction. We only deal with the appearance of it and how it meets our guidelines. That is something, though, that's legally bounding on the applicant and the contractor, developer, owners. And so although it's not our purview, there are ways to ensure that will be done in a proper fashion.
Well said. Okay, there's a first and a second and comment.
Okay. I just have to disclose that I wasn't part of a discussion, but I was at a district meeting last night, which has merchants from Broadway on the board, and one of the comments was that this alley is very valuable. I mean, per square inch on Broadway is very valuable, and they just hope that there would be a first-rate substation for the police on that. It should be a very good substation for giving up that property. I tend to kind of respect Ernest Tubbs' position that is a very important sign, an iconic sign in downtown Nashville. That's another reason why I'm not real thrilled with that third floor balcony. I see their point that it kind of mitigates the view. It's an exciting project. It's really, I see it as a win-win situation for Nashville and the developers. And I know one of the architects who's going to be working on this, and he's been involved with historic properties his whole career. And I know that he would take the utmost care about the Ernest Tubb building. And there's certainly, as Cyril said, there's certainly, if they hurt it, they'll have to fix it. And so I love the project. Hope it's going to be a dynamic substation, and but I just have a little problem with that blocking that sign. And the police are tough. I mean, they're not gonna melt in the rain. I mean, it's anyway. That's just my view of it. Love the project. Just have a problem with those balconies a little bit.
So another comment by the chair is that we have deliberated it. The public has heard it. The applicant has heard it. The neighbors have heard it. So I think there's lots of discussion in that, people can take notes about that and the applicant can work together because it is collaborative. It is a partnership of business, private, and also with Metro government. So there's lots of pieces that are coming through in here, but I think with our discussions is that we have this place of an opportunity to be best at it. And have the best use for this particular property and on Broadway. Because again, it's tough. This commission gets brought very unusual and very interesting and very push the edge kind of projects. So this is why we're still here almost 6 o'clock. So again, thank you. And I think we've had a motion. We've had a second. Yes, we are calling the question. Those in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes. Thank you. Thank you all. Appreciate your staying around.
Okay. Moving on to 1700 4th Avenue North. I am going to run through this relatively quickly because I don't think that there's any issues, and I'm pretty sure the applicant is in agreement with the staff recommendation. The house at 1700 4th Avenue North was constructed circa 1967 and does not contribute to the historic character of the neighborhood. Staff administratively permitted the demolition of the house in July 2022. The applicant proposes to construct a duplex infill and detached outbuilding on the lot. The front setback is consistent with the front setback of the house on the left. The infill and outbuilding both meet the interior and the rear setbacks. The project includes a setback determination request to reduce the street setback from Garfield from 20 feet to 10 feet for the infill and to 11 feet for the outbuilding. So base zoning is telling us that it should be 20 feet because it's a corner lot, but we find that it's appropriate to reduce that to 10 feet for the outbuilding, or 10 feet for the infill and 11 feet for the outbuilding. Staff finds that the proposed street setbacks can be appropriate in this case given the context of this corner. The two corner lots across Garfield Street include a recent multifamily development, which is closer to the street and not located in the historic overlay, and a green space for the Fair School, a historic landmark. The property located directly across 4th Avenue North is non-contributing structure and is a non-contributing structure in the overlay, and the property across the alley at the rear is a single-story multifamily building that is not in the overlay. Furthermore, the proposed side setbacks and width of the house combined continue the rhythm of spacing for this block face. Here are the front and the Garfield Street elevations. The proposed infill is 2 stories and 31 feet, which meets the design guidelines for infill in Salem Town. Salem Town's a little bit different than our other design guidelines in that it allows infill to be 2 stories and 35 feet pretty much no matter where the lot is. So this is 2 stories and a little bit smaller at 31 feet. The proposed outbuilding is also 2 stories with a footprint and ridge and wall heights that meet the design guidelines. Here are the interior side and rear elevations and the front and rear elevations of the outbuilding. And in conclusion, staff is recommending approval of the infill. I won't read through all of the conditions in the interest of time. The architect for the project, Preston Quirk, was here earlier. He had to leave. He wanted me to just convey that there was somebody here earlier who had a question or a concern. He spoke with them. They've seemed to have worked it out. We didn't get any public comment from that person, so that person has left. And Preston said that he is in agreement with the staff's conditions for approval.
Thank you very much. Any questions to Melissa? Okay, open public hearing. No, there's nobody left. Oh, close public hearing.
Madam Chair, with respect to 1700 4th Avenue North, if there's no further discussion, or I didn't even offer the opportunity for any discussion, I will move approval with staff recommendation, noting that the staff had spoken with the applicant before he had to leave the meeting.
Second.
There is the motion and the second, and all in favor?
Aye.
I see none opposed, and that motion passes. Thank you. Thank you for waiting till the very end. Thank you very much.
is not the very end.
Well, it's not, it's their end. It's their end.
Next up is 1501 Boscobel Street. This is an application for infill at 1501 Boscobel. The existing house on the lot is non-contributing. The staff has issued a preservation permit for demolition. So the 1400 to 1600 blocks of Boscobel have very little historic context. This area was added to the overlay in 2014 and includes infill that was constructed prior to that date without our review. Accordingly, infill on these two blocks can be 2 stories tall and can have flat roofs. These are all examples of non-contributing infill. The 2 structures on the left were approved by the commission, and then the one to the right there and the one below, those both predate the overlay. Here's the proposed front elevation. The infill is 40 feet wide and 2 stories at the front. Because of the extreme grade change, there is an additional story stepped back from the front. It steps back after about 16 feet. Stepped back partial 3rd floors have been approved by the commission on infill on this block, most noticeably on the 2 infills across the street at 1506 and 1508. So that's those 2 there, the top on the left. So here is the left side elevation showing that stepped back additional story. Due to the grade, the additional height is minimally visible from the street and creates a true 2-story form at both the front and the rear, with only a small portion being a full 3 stories tall. Here's the right side facade. Because of the lack of historic context on this block and because of the modern tall infill construction built prior to the expansion of the overlay, staff finds the overall modern design, roof forms, material, fenestration pattern, and scale to meet the design guidelines. Here's the rear elevation showing a true 2 stories at the rear due to grade. And here's the site plan. The infill meets all base zoning setbacks. The staff finds the front setback is appropriate given the context. The applicant is proposing 2 modest carports. They're about 360 square feet each. The applicant proposes 3-foot side setbacks, which does meet base zoning, but the guidelines call for a full 5-foot side setbacks for all outbuildings. In the recent past, the commission has found 3-foot setbacks to be appropriate in similar instances where the outbuilding is so modest. The outbuildings meet all the additional requirements for outbuildings. In conclusion, staff recommends approval of the proposed infill and outbuildings with the conditions that the finished floor height be consistent with the finished floor heights of adjacent historic houses, HVAC location be approved, staff shall approve materials, and then the foundation heights of the outbuilding shall not exceed 1 foot from grade at the highest point of grade. That's standard in the guidelines. With these conditions, staff finds the proposed infill and outbuildings meet the design guidelines. I know the applicant is here, would like to speak, or?
Any questions?
She's available for questions. Do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, any questions?
And you did receive a letter from the public about this.
We had public comment.
Yes.
Thank you for the late presentation, applicant. Thank you so much for staying around. Any questions or motion?
I think this was added, and so the architectural, the porch, the in out of just the proportions of this are a little odd in terms of something in a historic district. But I think, given the lack of context here, I would not take exception to it. But it is a very unusual setup and execution. Just architecturally, it's unusual in that way. But I don't take exception to it necessarily, given the circumstances.
Mm-hmm. Duly noted. Anyone else?
If there are no other comments, I'm ready for a motion. I would like to move to approve 1501 Boscobel Street with staff recommendations.
Motion?
Second.
Second, whichever one we want to choose. I think she got it. This is like, who was first? It was just when I crossed the line. Okay, Commissioner Price and Commissioner Mayhall. Yes, and the motion is. And can we? Who's for it? All in favor? I see none opposed, and that motion passes. Thank you.
Okay, well, this infill project is directly across the street from the one that Jenny just presented, so also very similar. Oh, that's yours, you're right. Well, that's why it's so similar. There we go, here's mine. Similar to the one you just saw, there was a non-contributing house on the lot. There was an administrative permit to demolish the house issued earlier this month. On this side of, it's on the opposite side of the street, so the opposite side of the street, those lots are actually quite shallow, and because of that, I think it is less than, I think it's like 120 something feet deep, and because of that, staff finds that the attached garage off the alley does meet the design guidelines because it is so shallow. And again, similar to Jenny's, well, sorry, things got mixed up. There's not much historic context on this lot. Trying to find my photos. Here we go. There's not much historic context on this lot. These two houses directly to the right were approved by the commission, and you may not see it so easily from the street, but they are 2 stories at the front, and then as the lot slopes up pretty drastically, they gain a 3rd story. But you can see in elevation here the 2 stories at the front and the 3rd story in the rear, but because the grade is going up so much, kind of you're not really getting much of a full 3-story at any point in time. You're kind of getting 2 and then 2. By the time you get to the alley, you're pretty much just back at 2. Again, it's a modern design, but staff finds that meets the context because there really is no historic context on this block, and there is a lot of infill that was done prior to the overlay, and even the infill that was done after the overlay has been very modern in design. So here are some more context photos. So staff is recommending approval of the infill with our standard conditions about finished floor heights, approving windows and doors, and the HVAC locations. I'm not sure if the applicant is here. So.
I don't think so, Melissa.
Okay.
Melissa, do you know if on the outbuilding, there was like a little...
It's actually an attached garage.
So is that, whatever that little sliver is, so it's 2 garages and there's a party wall between them.
Right.
Does that run and separate them, sort of moving all the way back?
I believe so. Let's see. I don't know if you can see it here. I guess you can't really see it in the side elevations. I think those are kind of outdoor patio decks that are covered underneath the roof. We don't typically allow those walls on front facades, like if it was a traditional duplex, but on a rear, on the alley, we've approved them in the past.
That might be a play, like if we could avoid cutting siding like that's 3 inches wide.
Right.
Maybe we just want them to put just a flush.
Like a post or something.
A flush board to make it look like a column there would be.
Yeah.
We're in the weeds, sorry. But that's going to look terrible.
Yeah, it might be not as easy to construct as it's drawn.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to open public hearing and close public hearing. We're getting silly now, but anyway. Close public hearing, Commissioner. Or anybody wants to make a motion or more discussion?
With respect to 1510 Boscoville Street, I move approval with staff's recommendation, and if staff can direct the applicant on some very minor construction details, constructability details.
Okay.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Mosley and seconded by Commissioner Johnson. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Okay. I see none opposed, and that motion passes. Robin, is there anything else we need to discuss? Oh.
There is, sorry. You may remember 4 hours ago.
Oh, we pulled that from consent. Okay, I did not put that on my note, but thank you.
There was an item pulled from consent. It is 2200 18th Avenue South. A neighbor had asked to pull it from consent. I went out and spoke with her in the hallway and explained the project to her, and she does not have any objections. I'm happy to quickly run through the project with you, or if you feel happy to vote on it.
Thank you so much.
We would also be fine with you just voting on it.
Thank you so much.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion, given that 2200.
Got you on that one. Open public hearing, close public hearing. Now you can make the motion.
Madam Chair, accepting that the staff had this on the consent agenda and that there are no problems with it, I move that we accept the staff's recommendation for 2200 that was pulled off consent.
There's a motion.
Approval.
Second.
Second. All in favor? Aye. None opposed. That motion passes. Robin, the vice chair, seconded it, just to be sure. Okay. All right. And the vice chair says we're adjourning now, so I don't think we have to vote on that, do we, legal? Do we actually have to vote on?
You can move to adjourn, or you as the chair can simply adjourn the meeting, but there can't be a motion. You can do it either way.
Really? Okay, I move to adjourn, and the vice chair has seconded, and all in favor. Yeah. Staff, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.